in Melbourne town where the suits all grind.
Alrighty, ladies and gentlemen, and we are back. So it's Friday night. Have to do a little bit of tidy up here because we've still got just over 2 hours or so worth of day 27 before we get stuck into day 28. One little thing that I will say though, I came in to sit down at my office earlier, and turns out there was a surprise for me sitting on my desk. I got my very own play button. That way? Yeah. Little lady Overlaw'd drew up her own play button and decided to give it to me. You know what? I think that might actually mean a little bit more. She actually wrote the word 1,000 on the back because she thinks you get the play button at 1,000 subs. But that is not a reason for you to not hit the sub button, people. I think that's adorable. So I'm going to keep that. That's going to sit right there. So, but anyway, let's get stuck back into this. I'm going to keep working my model, which I've been meaning to try and get finished. But we're still in the cross-examination of Lucky, the plow driver. Poor guy. I don't think he really deserved any of this. And I still maintain that I believe that if it hadn't been for Karen waking up and whatever else, he's the one that probably would have been copping it. So let's get stuck into it.
You said that when you went on your second pass, it was around 3:15?
I told him I went up Fairview between about 2:40 to 2:45. And I said about 45 minutes later, I went for the second time.
Okay. Now you had said 2:30, and you just now said 2:40 to 2:45, and then you said 45 minutes later.
Yep.
Okay. Do you remember telling the private investigator that when you think, or you said you saw a Ford Edge, you were actually still on Cedar Brook, not on Fairview passing by it? You saw it from the street at Cedar Brook. Do you remember telling him that?
I don't remember. I don't remember ever saying that.
Okay. May I approach?
Yes.
I'll show you a copy. This is a report that you didn't write, so I don't want you to read it.
Didn't he say earlier that he was already wearing contact lenses and now he's had to put some glasses on? Okay.
I want to show it to you and see if it helps remind you of what you told the private investigator that day. You can look at any part of this, but what I'm asking you is whether or not you remember telling the private investigator that when you saw the car, you weren't passing on Fairview, you were up on Cedar. That's the question I'm asking. So I'd ask you to look at whatever part you want, but I'm going to point out the part to you. When you're done, don't answer, just look up and then I'll get to ask you some questions about your memory, okay?
Okay.
And so I've directed to this part, but you can look at any part that you want, sir. Are you done, sir?
Yes.
May I approach, Your Honor?
Yes.
Sir, do you now remember when you were speaking to the defense investigator about seeing a car? You said that about 3:30 to 4 a.m., when you were plowing Cedar Crest Road, you looked toward Fairview Road and saw a small SUV parked in front of the house. Remember telling the PI that?
I never remember telling him that.
When you spoke to law enforcement, not the Canton Police or the State Police, you understood it was important to be as accurate as possible?
Yes.
And you understood, at least with that law enforcement agency, if you misled them in any way, it could be up to a 10-year penalty?
Yes.
When you spoke to them, did you take that interview very seriously?
Yes.
Tried to be as precise and accurate as you could?
Yes.
And when you spoke to them, obviously, like anybody you had in mind, there could be serious consequences if they felt misled.
Yes.
You try to be honest with them,
Yes.
provide them your best memory in good faith.
Yes.
And this was shortly before, well, actually, this was May 24th, 2023, correct?
Correct.
When you met, there was more than one person there from this agency?
I believe so.
Was there potentially two?
There was two.
And when you met with them, they asked you about when you began working that night.
Yes.
You told them 11:30 to midnight.
I never told him that.
And so as you sit here today, your memory is you did not tell those law enforcement agents that you began work at 11:30 to 12?
We had a 2:30 start time.
I understand, but I'm asking you,
I never told him. It was always 2:30 start time.
when you spoke to them, do you remember telling them the first time you were out near the area was midnight?
Nope.
I mean, I'll be
No.
honest.
When you spoke to those law enforcement personnel, were they taking notes?
I'd feel a little bit
I believe so.
threatened anyway.
Have you ever seen their report?
The first trial I did, yes.
Who showed you that report?
It was shown to me by Prosecutor Lally.
You think Prosecutor Lally showed you that report?
It was shown to me.
And do you remember telling those two law enforcement personnel that you believe that there were emergency vehicles, ambulances, or police cars in front of Fairview at 3 to 3:30 a.m.?
I do not.
Are you saying that you did not say these things to them, or are you saying that that's not your memory?
That's not what I
Every
said.
damn time.
And so you're saying that's wrong. You're denying
Correct.
you made those statements.
Correct.
At the time they say that you told them there was emergency vehicles there at 3 a.m., that is the same time that you told the PI that you saw the Ford Edge, around 3:30 to 4, correct?
About 3:30 is when I saw the Ford Edge.
It was dark out that night, wasn't it?
Correct.
There are no street lights down near that flagpole area of 34 Fairview, is there?
Yes, there is.
Okay. Was it on that night?
I can't tell you honestly if it was.
You testified at trial? I'm sorry, at a proceeding last year?
I testified that there were. It was asked to me that there were not any streetlights, and I answered it in the affirmative way. And living in that neighborhood, I saw that there were actual streetlights.
You testified at a proceeding last year, didn't you?
Yes.
I mean, you testified at the proceeding. Did you meet anybody from the defense close in time to that proceeding?
I don't know, when we met, or how close to the proceedings it was.
Do you remember being prepared before you went into trial last time?
Yes,
By?
by Yannetti, excuse me.
Do you remember telling
Nally?
the defense
Okay.
private investigator that you made your final pass at 6:30 a.m.?
I remember I told him it was about 3 hours going down Cedar Crest and was not able to go to the end of Fairview due to the first responders.
At trial last year, do you remember saying it was 5:30?
I did.
And today you had said about 6:15.
Yes,
Okay. You weren't timing anything on a watch for times, were you?
I was not.
You were not accounting in any way for time whatsoever when you were out that night, were you?
No, I was not.
When you're providing times, are you trying to use your best memory?
Yes,
Do you recognize that you have a differing memory on times of what you did that night?
No.
You talked about your view from the tow truck and that you have a bunch of lights on it. On the tow truck, you had mentioned that your vision to the side was 5 to 6 feet.
Can you rephrase that, please?
Yes, of course.
Change
You
it
said
to
when you were
what you
driving a tow truck, you could see forward and sideways.
Okay. I don't want to be. I don't drive a tow truck.
My apologies. My apologies. A snowplow.
Thank
You
you.
said you can see forward and sideways.
I can see forward, I can see diagonal, and I can see right to left.
When you look right to left, you said you could see about 5 feet.
Correct.
Do the lighting conditions affect how well you can see?
No.
Does the weather?
Yes.
When you're plowing, are you ever looking at the street in front of you?
Yes.
Are you looking at people's front yards?
Yes.
And so, what did you see as far as the front door of the Albert House that night? Was it open or closed?
It was closed.
With lights on?
I can't answer that for sure. I don't remember if there were lights on.
How about the neighbors on the left? Were you looking at their front line?
Yes.
Did you see if their lights were on?
Again, I didn't recognize if their lights were on.
Do you look at every neighbor's front line up to the door as you're driving in the snow plowing?
I look to the right and to the left, and my eyes will graze to the yard. Yes, I will look there.
You were saying you have a specific memory of looking at the Albert front yard all the way to the door. Do you have a specific memory of looking at the other neighbors' yards to their door?
Can you repeat that, please? I'm sorry.
Yes, you said that you looked at the Albert House all the way to the door.
Correct.
Do you have a memory of looking at any other houses all the way to the door?
Yes.
Okay. Which house had a dumpster in front of it?
I don't know. I wasn't paying attention to a dumpster. Dumpster wouldn't be in the front yard.
Are you sure on your route there was no dumpsters in anybody's front yard?
I can tell you there was a dumpster this week.
No. I'm more interested in January 29, 2020.
I can't answer to that. I don't remember.
How many goddamn membership chats have you got? You're number one because you won't shut up in chat. I'm guessing this is the big own that Brennan was putting out there about how he, like, missed a dumpster.
A dumpster, a 15 by 20 foot dumpster, that would be bigger than a man's body, wouldn't it?
Yes, it would be.
And so you have no really specific memory of the other homes in the neighborhood that night?
I mean, I looked. I saw. I didn't see a dumpster that would have definitely stuck out.
Okay. You said you had vision as far as your eyes could see.
Correct.
What does that mean?
I was going to say, I knew that was going to
It
come
means
up.
if there were, my eyes were, as long as they're open, I can see as far as they will let me see.
Is that dependent on lighting conditions, darkness, snow?
Correct.
That night, did you have any difficulty paying attention or driving?
I did not.
Did you have a small accident that night?
I did.
Okay, what did you hit?
I hit a portable basketball net.
Was that part because of the weather conditions? You didn't have a good opportunity to see it?
No. I definitely saw it and just did not judge enough.
You said that you went up and down the road a couple of times. When you were asked to describe the car that you said you saw, when you first spoke to the defendant's private investigator, you didn't give any detail about the type of car, did you?
I told her it was a Ford Edge.
Okay. When you first spoke to the investigator, you used the words Ford Edge?
I did.
Did they bring you to a parking lot at some point?
They did.
And when they brought you to a parking lot, did they have you go out in the parking lot and look at a Ford Edge?
They did.
And when they had you go out and look at the Ford Edge, did they have you identify that as the type of car?
Yes, they did.
And when you did that, how many cars were in the parking lot?
We had a hockey game, so there were several, at least 100, 150.
Who pointed you to the Ford Edge?
I pointed to it.
Did the investigator take you to the Ford Edge?
No, he did not.
It was just an open parking lot, and he asked you to look around to see if there happened to be a similar car?
No, I told him a Ford Edge. He wanted to make sure I knew what a Ford Edge looked like. I pointed to the Ford Edge, and he was satisfied.
So after you said a Ford Edge, he brought you to a parking lot to point out a car?
We were at my place of business. We just walked out the door.
Where was that?
At the Metropolis ice rink.
The rink?
Ice rink, yes.
Did you then meet the investigator later on at a school?
Yes, I did.
And who did you meet at the school?
I met Paul again.
And what was the purpose of that?
He wanted to go through my route.
You want to go through your route.
Correct.
And then, did you choose to meet at the school?
I did.
You did?
I did.
And why did you choose the school?
It was an easier landmark for the gentleman to get to, and it was minutes from my route.
Did you know that former Trooper Proctor's sister worked there?
I had no idea.
You said last year that when you went by Fairview, did you say that you would buy your final pass at 5:30 a.m.?
No.
Okay. May I approach that way?
Yes.
Sir, when you have contact, you also wear reading glasses?
Yes. I can't read things up close.
Understood. This is trial testimony, testimony from June 21st, 2024. And you were asked do you recall what time it was that you wound up back on Fairview? You said, I don't honestly recall what specific time. Yes?
Yes.
And then you were asked, sure. Approximately, if it was 3:15 to 3:30 that second time, what would be your best estimate of the time when you came back? And what did you say?
Say about 5:30.
And so even last year, you were having some difficulty remembering the times, right?
Christine.
Were you having difficulty last year remembering the times that you were on Fairview?
No.
When you said you were on Fairview last year at 5:30, you didn't see anything on the Albert front lawn at 5:30 a.m.?
I wasn't on Fairview at 5:30 a.m.
Okay. Were you asked last year about your travels on Fairview?
Yes.
Okay. When you asked about, recall, was time you wound up on Fairview, and you said you didn't remember. Do you remember that testimony?
I do.
Is that true testimony?
Yes, it is.
Okay, so you had some difficulties in your memory of when you were on Fairview when you testified last year. Isn't that fair to say?
No, it's not fair.
And then you were asked approximately if it was 3:15 to 3:30 the second time, what time did you come back?
And I said, if I were to guess, I said 45 minutes later.
Did you say, I would say, if I had to say, it would have...
Stingy said he can show you the street. Plowing white, blinding.
What? All right. Thank you for the super chat, Stingy.
been 5:30 up Fairview.
That time was incorrect. It was 6:15. I couldn't go down any further due to the police presence.
So your testimony last year, you understandably made a mistake about the time,
I get
correct?
that you've
I
missed
did.
me and you're overcome with
And
emotion, but kind
it's
of...
true, isn't it, that you really have somewhat foggy memory about the times.
It is not.
I can
That
show
time
you
of
the world.
5:30 is very different than the time you told the agents when you met them, I'm sorry, the law enforcement officials that weren't from
he can
Canton or the
show
state
you
police.
the
That was very different than when you told them 3 to 3:30.
Very different.
And it's different than the 3:30 to 4 timeline
That actually
that you
makes
gave
sense. All right.
the defense private investigator the first time you spoke to them. Correct?
Correct.
And it's different than what you told the jury today, that it was 6:15.
It's different, but it's not.
When you plowed that night, did you have any reason to look for somebody who was lying on the side of a yard?
No.
Did you have any expectation somebody would be lying helpless on the side of a yard that night?
No.
If you had seen somebody, certainly you would have helped.
Correct.
When you said that, when the private investigator asked you where you were when you said you saw the Fort Edge, are you saying that you didn't tell the private investigator that you were on Cedar?
I don't remember telling him I was on Cedar Crest. I do remember telling him that I had turned onto Fairview and saw the vehicle.
Cedar Crest in a storm at night is quite a distance from the flagpole at Fairview, isn't it?
No.
About 300 feet?
Roughly.
Difficult to see under those conditions?
No.
Could we have Exhibit 71, Stream 0, at about 6:17 a.m., please?
Yeah, price of food can be quite a big thing, honestly.
Could you stop it there? Do you see that street light?
I do?
Okay. At the end of that road, past the street light, is Cedar Crest, correct?
Correct.
Is that a fair depiction of the elements that night around that time?
Yes.
And in this case, there's further illumination with the car that's facing us?
Correct.
That wasn't there, was it?
Correct.
You said after you saw law enforcement, did you come down Fairview after you saw law enforcement?
I was on Fairview already when I saw the law enforcement.
Did you drive by Cedar Crest again to go back and forth and watch what was going on, or did you go on your route?
I went on my route, which included Cedar Crest.
Did you keep driving by because you wanted to watch, or did you just leave and do your regular route?
I went and did my regular route.
Could I have 61927, please? And could you play it? If you could back up a little before 61927. Is that weather consistent with what it looked like to you?
Yes.
Is
I
that you
think I
there?
broke the chat.
I don't know if that's me. Yes, that's me. That is me.
Could we go to 63245, please? Is that you again?
That one, I can't tell if that was me again.
Could we go to 63514, please? Was that you?
I don't see it. I don't see the truck. I'm sorry.
It's okay. Could we go back to 63512?
That looks like to be a pickup truck. That does not look like my truck.
63745, please. And that's you again, right?
Again, I can't tell you for sure if that was me.
Those were not your red and orange lights consistent with the earlier ones that went by?
What I saw the first time was the reflecting tape off the body of my truck.
Can we go to
I have
7?
a plow guy that is a contractor that we work tandem together.
And was he out there that night as well, going by Fairview?
Correct.
Okay. Did you ever tell the private investigator about him?
Yes, I did.
7 o'clock, 22 seconds, please. Is that you, sir?
I can't say for sure.
7:15, 45 seconds, please.
I'm still finishing off the perfect grade Strike Freedom code query. I literally haven't sat in front of a computer since the last time I streamed this. Oh wait, that's not true. What did I stream?
Do you recognize that plow?
Again, I do not.
7:19 and 55 seconds, please. Was that you, sir?
That was me.
How long does your route take?
It's hard to say. I mean, as long as it's on, it can take as long as it takes.
Well, if you're going to do a pass, how long does an entire pass take?
If I were to do from Cedar Crest to the end, it would take probably 10 minutes. If I were to do the entire route, I'm not cleaning up. I'm just giving it a pass so people can get through. It takes about 3 hours. It could take 4 hours.
When you mentioned Brian Albert on your direct examination, had you talked to the defense about Brian Albert in your preparation for testimony?
No,
You knew some of the Albert family,
I know the entire Albert family.
and you know Brian Albert as a police officer?
Yes, I do.
Why is it that 3 times in your direct testimony you characterized him as a first responder?
Because he's a police officer. They're first responders.
Did anybody ever suggest to you to use the terms or the phrases first responder when you were describing Brian Albert?
No one did. Those are my words.
Since your testimony last year, have you received any more focusing or targeting of harassment?
No, I didn't say that.
Since last year when you testified, have you received any recent aggression towards you for testifying?
No,
Have you had any further focus or problems?
no.
I have no further questions.
Very briefly, sir.
He was trying to show that he didn't have a proper grasp on time and therefore can't be
Asked
trusted as
by
to what
Mr.
happened
Brennan
and when.
about whether you saw a dumpster that night. Do you recall that line of questioning?
I do.
In the aftermath of January 29th of 2022, was a dumpster all over the news for the next 3.5 years?
Not that I'm aware of.
You were asked
Come on, Eddie, that's a
About-
stupid question.
going through your route with the defense investigator and giving a statement to the defense investigator.
Yes.
How soon after January 29th of 2022 was that?
2 weeks.
Were the events fresh in your mind at that time?
Yes.
Finally, oh, actually not finally, I got 2 more points, but they're both brief. You had mentioned that night you actually misjudged and hit a net.
Yes.
Can you describe the basketball apparatus that, and I'm going to ask you what part of it you hit, but describe what that looks like.
It's got a base with wheels on it. It's portable, so you can move it in and out. And it's got the basketball frame, and it's got the backboard and then rim.
Okay, so this is not a pole that was cemented into the ground.
Correct.
But perhaps we're
Yes,
all
Billy,
familiar with
Stingy's
the
being a
black
dick and
base
blowing
that
up my
maybe you put
Discord.
sandbags on,
Correct.
that type of thing to keep it in place, but it does have wheels?
Correct.
All right, and you mentioned the net. The net is the rope netting that comes down, correct? There's also a hoop that keeps the net in place?
Yes.
And the pole?
Correct.
And the base?
Correct.
Of all those things, what part did your Franken truck actually catch?
It caught the net in the little bit part of the frame, of
Franken-truck.
the frame where the net was.
Something that you saw from the beginning, you just misjudged the distance.
Correct.
Now, finally, with regard to the 5:30 testimony that you gave last year,
Yes.
did you also testify that the last pass that you tried to make when the police were blocking the scene was about 3 hours after that 3:30 second up and down?
Yes.
So why is it last year that you testified that it was 3 hours later, but you came up with the time of 5:30 as the final time?
As he's asking me these questions, I'm trying to do the math in my head. I'm sorry, math is not my strong suit.
What time was it when you made that final pass, sir?
6:15, 6:15, 6:30.
I have nothing further.
You mentioned you're trying to do the math in your head. There is no reason why you would specifically remember certain times on each pass other than trying to remember and give an accounting, right?
Could you rephrase that, please?
Sure. You don't have your watch out on a certain schedule that you have to pass a certain street at a certain time.
Correct.
You weren't marking your times to some event when you were driving up and down the street that night,
Oh,
were you?
Larry's there, is he?
No.
So you're trying to go back with your memory and piece it together the best you can.
Correct.
And that's why you're giving estimates, yes? And when you
Correct.
spoke to those law enforcement officials, not Canton, not state police, and you said at 3 o'clock you saw first responder vehicles, that was based on your memory, wasn't it?
Yes.
It was based on your memory.
Not at 3:30.
Right. Do you know that there was a car similar to a Ford Edge in front of 34 Fairview around 6 a.m. that morning?
I wasn't able to get in front of Fairview Drive, 34 Fairview, at 6 o'clock in the morning.
Have you ever met Kerry Roberts before?
I have not.
Counsel just asked you if there was a lot of media about this case, and you said that there was.
I
Did he just ask you a question about whether there was a lot of attention on this case?
Objection.
Did he just talk to you about everything that happened after this case, all the attention on this case?
Objection.
You remember his question about all the attention after this case?
He asked specifically a question about the dumpsters.
And he said that wasn't subject to a lot of attention, was it?
Correct.
Right. But this case was.
The case itself, yes.
The people involved in this case were subject to a lot of attention.
Correct.
And you spoke to the defense investigator after this case as far as attention is concerned. You remember speaking to the investigator on June 5th, 2023.
Yes.
And do you know, coincidentally, that is the day that the blogger put out the articles on you, accusing you of not doing the right thing?
Objection.
May I approach?
Yes.
Showing you a document. Let's take a look at that document. What day is that document dated?
June 5th, 2023.
Without reading it, that document possible you.
Correct.
And your friends and people in the community talked to you about this article, didn't they?
Not specifically this article, but they were sending me stuff that were being printed about me, yes.
Why don't you take a little look at what was said and you can tell us whether that's the same type of information that was being conveyed to you through intermediaries.
Can you ask that question again, please?
Yes, sir. Was this some of the kind of attention that you were receiving on June 5th after you spoke to the defense investigator?
Yes.
Like, come sidebar.
Okay.
Oh, it's so much easier being able to use the mouse. Oh, that's a hell of a sidebar too. Holy crap! Honestly thought I'd be here longer.
All right, Mr. Brennan.
Maybe I should have just did this in the car.
Sorry, I have just a few more questions. When I had mentioned about meeting the defense investigator on June 5th, 2023, I misspoke. It was June 5th, 2024. Does that sound more like it?
Yes.
June 5th, 2024, was that before, shortly before you testified before?
Yes.
You were asked on redirect examination whether any dumpsters got any attention about this case. The question I was asking is, did you notice things that might have been open and obvious?
Look, I'll be honest, Adara, I was sitting here thinking it, but I wasn't going to say it. I was thinking that either the guy is a little bit simple or he might be a little bit slow. Either way, I don't know that he plays into either sides. What am I trying to say? I don't know that it works well for either side, honestly. But yeah, I'm inclined to agree.
And you have no memory of an actual dumpster in the area, correct?
Correct.
If I could have on the screen Exhibit 37, still photo from that clip. May I have a moment, Your Honor?
Sure.
God, this thing is going to look so awesome when it's done. Look at this. The whole thing just like pops open when you move
It's
it.
a video that I'll stop at for a certain point.
Okay.
Exhibit 71.
See, Black Rose?
And sir, do you notice the big red dumpster to the right side across from Fairview?
Yes.
You can take that down. Sir, when we started the break, I'd asked you some questions. I showed you a document, asked you if you were aware what was inside that document, and you mentioned that was around June 5th, 2023. That was before your last testimony in this case.
Yes.
And you knew that a person or persons were putting out private pictures of you online.
I did notice.
And those private pictures, you didn't give anybody permission or want that attention, did you?
I did not.
In fact, it wasn't just some private pictures. It was pictures taken from a number of different times in your life, correct?
Yes.
You never gave anybody permission to do that?
I did not.
You didn't want people talking about you or asking you questions? That was none of their business, did you?
I did not.
And it was embarrassing that you were being made this public spectacle when you had done nothing wrong, correct?
Ask it differently.
Was it embarrassing what they were doing to you?
Sorry, it just occurred to me that Stingy's our resident expert on dumpsters. Yes, that was not a true dumpster. Well done, Stingy.
I wouldn't say embarrassing as more as aggravating.
In fact, they were calling your boss. Yes?
I'm going to allow that.
Yes.
And you mentioned how hard you work.
Yes.
Plow, you even used to deliver peaches to 8 years.
Yes.
Zamboni, anytime you can work, you try hard, don't you?
I do.
And when someone's calling your boss, giving undue attention to you, didn't it create some concern that could affect your livelihood?
I did not think it was going to affect me in that manner.
In addition to dragging you into this, because of you, your brother was dragged.
No, I agree.
into
That
this.
sounds different.
Ask it differently.
When you were getting this information about what was happening, you learned that they were also dragging your brother into this because of you, correct?
I'll sustain that.
Did you learn that information was coming out about your brother?
I knew my brother was dealing with other issues regarding this case.
And certainly, you're close with your brother.
Yes.
You care for your brother.
Yes.
You did not want to upset anybody and have more attention brought onto your brother, did you?
I did not.
And there was an attempt to link your brother to one of the outlets, in fact, correct?
Yes.
As well as you.
I don't know if I was being linked.
Did you know the information of trying to so-called out you about the fact that you work for Chris Albert?
I'm going to sustain that the words first.
Were you aware when your friends and family were telling you about what was going on, about an attempt to draw a relationship between you and the outlets?
No.
And were you aware when people were telling you what was happening, that there was attacks on you personally, like finances and things like that?
Yes, I was aware of that.
And certainly, that is pretty discouraging when that is happening and you've done nothing wrong, isn't it?
It was, again, aggravating.
Just very quickly, for the purposes of taxes, making progress. Yes, I have to show this on screen every now and then so that it can continue as a tax write-off. Getting there.
And this was all happening
Hey, so
before you came in and testified last time I tried.
Correct.
After you testified, things got better.
I wouldn't say better. It's gotten a little more easily manageable.
You were no longer being harassed, you were being embraced.
Correct.
May I approach?
Yes.
Showing you a photograph, do you recognize that?
I do.
Is that part of the embracing process after you testified a certain way at the last trial?
It was after I testified, yes.
With redaction to known people to introduce a select portion of this.
So I need to see what that is. I'm just sidebar and make this very brief, please. So that's next in evidence, Madam Clerk. Madam Court Reporter, please.
And I just showed you a photograph. Was that a fair and accurate depiction of you after your last testimony?
Yes.
Reflecting you now being embraced rather than attacked?
Yes.
Could we show the photo, please, Ms. Gilman, with the court's permission?
Yes.
And that's you, Mr. Laughlin?
Yes.
You can take that down, please. Thank you for your time.
Just very briefly, sir, if I might, Your Honor.
Sure.
Mr. Loughran, I should say. The questioning about the attention that you received in 2023 when you received secondhand the information from the blogger, was that before or long after you were interviewed and gave a statement to the defense investigator in February of 2022?
It was long after.
Nothing further. Thank you.
Okay. All right, Mr. Loughran, you are all set, sir.
Hey, Kathy.
Is there another witness, Mr.
Yes, Your Honor. The defense calls Karina Kolakifis.
All right, do you need to see me before Ashley's coming in, or will that be in a while?
I can't remember.
Why don't you come on up really quickly?
Did he just say I can't remember? That proves that we know Lucky did it. You can be nice to Lucky.
Identification.
Now, this whole thing, he's the only person I believe who doesn't smell in some way, shape, or form.
Can you guys step up? Face the card and raise your right hand, please.
She solemnly swear the evidence you give the court, jury, the case now, hearing the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
Yes.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
May I proceed, Your Honor?
Yes, John.
Good afternoon, ma'am.
Good afternoon.
Would you please introduce yourself to the jury and spell both your first name and your last name?
Sure. My name's Karina Kolakithis. It's Karina. Last name Kolakithis. Kolokithas.
That's almost as bad as your name.
It's long.
In what town do you live, ma'am?
I live in Canton.
How long have you lived there?
We've lived there for 22
I
years.
doubt it.
Where did you grow up?
So I initially grew up in Randolph, and then we moved to Braintree, and I finished my last 3 years of high school and stayed there till I was married.
And where did you go to school after high school?
So after high school, I went to Northeastern University. I did the pharmacy program there.
And what is your profession?
I'm a pharmacist.
How long have you worked as a pharmacist?
So total years is about 30 years as a pharmacist, but I have been at my current job for about 24 years.
Are you married?
I am married.
To whom?
His name is Nicholas Kolakithis.
How long have you been married for?
24 years.
Do you have children?
I have 2 children.
And without giving us their names, can you tell us if you have boys or girls and what their ages are?
So I have 2 girls. One is 19 and one is 17.
Have you raised your children in Canton?
Yes, I have.
Do your children play sports, or had they played sports in Canton?
I have both girls played sports in Canton. One actively is playing sports there, and one is in college, so she's not playing sports.
Understood. What sports have your girls played?
So they primarily played basketball, and my youngest plays lacrosse as well.
From raising your children in Canton and attending their sporting events, I'm assuming, have you met other parents with children on your daughter's teams?
Yes, I have.
Specifically, did you come to know Jennifer and Matthew McCabe?
Yes, I have.
And is that the way that you came to know them?
Correct. Typically, that's how we came to become friends with people, through the sports.
Now, prior to January 28th of 2022, how long had you known Jennifer McCabe specifically?
I would say about 10 years or so.
And during that time, what was the nature of your relationship with Jennifer McCabe?
So we were just friends through the kids. Multiple kids did different sports. They played on different sports teams, so we were friends through that.
And how often, or if at all, did you socialize with her and or her husband?
So
Serious trial.
typically, sometimes if the kids had play dates, it was mostly my youngest daughter, to be honest. So my youngest daughter and one of her daughters were good friends and played on similar sporting teams. So they would have play dates and stuff like that. So sometimes we'd see them after a game, or they had a play date or something like that.
And I'm sorry, it's a little loud with the fan. If the last part of your answer, if I didn't hear it, I'm thinking the jurors might not have heard that. You said it was mostly after games?
After sporting, after play dates, or sports and stuff like that.
I see. And would there be times where, after a game you go out for pizza, that type of thing?
Yeah, you'd go out for pizza, or the girls would be like, "Hey, Mom, can we have a play date? Can a couple of the girls, come over the house and
Okay.
do stuff like that?"
Prior to January 28th of 2022, did you know John O'Keefe?
So I knew John O'Keefe same way. His niece and my younger daughter were good friends, are good friends. So same thing. We knew him through the sports as well. My husband coached his niece in a couple teams, and they also played soccer together, so that's how we knew John.
And do you remember how long you would have known?
I mean, to be fair, I still didn't believe that Alessi was 68, so I don't know. Something's in the water in Canton, and they're all just regressing.
Him for before January 28th of 2022?
I would say about 9 years or so.
And what was the nature of that relationship?
Friendly. Didn't like go out with him, but we were friends. Like we saw him all the time. He would, take my younger daughter with him. We just saw him all the time. So weekly, I would say.
Sure. What about Karen Reed? Did you know Karen Reed prior to January 28th of 2022?
So same thing, met Karen through John. And I believe the first time I met her was at Jennifer McCabe's house sometime in 2020.
2020?
I've
Correct.
seen the
So
effects
this
of
would have
Botox. This is
been
not
during the
Botox.
pandemic?
Correct.
And do you see Karen in the courtroom today?
I do.
Would you please point her out and describe what she's wearing?
She is wearing a blue suit at the table with her lawyers.
Okay. May the record reflect that the witnesses identified Ms. Reed?
Okay.
Now, prior to January 28th of 2022, how often would you have seen or interacted with Karen Reed in any capacity, if you know?
So Karen sometimes would come to watch games of John's niece. So I would see her there, and we just casually talk.
And what was the nature of your relationship with her prior to January 28th of 2022?
We were friendly.
All right. Now, directing your attention to January 28th of 2022, do you recall that being a Friday?
Correct.
What did you do that day
So that day I worked.
as a pharmacist?
Correct.
Do you recall what your hours were?
Approximately, I would say 8 to 4:30 that day.
What plans did you have after work?
So after work, my plans were to go to the Canton High basketball game to watch my daughter play.
And what plans came up for before the game that night?
So before the game, before I left work, there was a text that went around saying that some of the parents were going to meet at the Canton Junction before the game, and if anybody wanted to stop by and grab a bite to eat.
And what is the Canton Junction?
So it used to be like a little pub/restaurant in Canton.
Did you go to the Canton Junction?
So I went home first because I went home first. I had a bag I had to switch out of because we have to have plastic clear bags at work. So anyway, so I went home, and then after that, I stopped at the Canton Junction.
Okay. And did you go alone or with someone?
So I went by myself.
And when you got there, did you see people that you knew?
Correct. So I walked in, and there was a bunch of parents there from the varsity teams, the varsity team.
And, excuse me, was either John O'Keefe or Karen Reed there?
They were not there.
What about Jennifer McCabe and or Matthew McCabe, her husband?
I believe Matthew McCabe was there. I don't believe Jennifer went to the Canton Junction.
Now, how long were you at the Canton Junction for?
I would say less than an hour.
Do you recall about what time it was that you would have been leaving there?
I'm not really sure. The game started at 6:30, so before 6:30.
All right. And when you left the Canton Junction, where did you go?
I went to Canton High School to watch the game.
And in the gymnasium, with whom did you sit to watch your daughter's basketball game?
I'm not sure who I sat with, but it would have been those parents from the varsity team, whoever was there and wherever there was a spot.
Was it generally a custom that the parents of all the kids on the team would kind of congregate together in the stands?
Correct.
Do you recall what time the basketball game ended?
I believe the game ended around 8:30.
Where did you go after the basketball game?
So after the game ended, I went down and waited on the court for my daughter to come out of the locker room, greeted her, the players, and then I said to everybody, I'm going home.
Okay. And you did go home?
Correct. I went home after the game.
And having now made it home, what were your plans that night?
So my plans were to stay home. I was tired. I worked all day, watched the game. I was pretty much done with the day. So my plans were to stay home.
At some point, did those plans wind up changing?
So then I started getting text messages from my husband saying, you should come out. We're going to go to the waterfall. And I said, no, I'm not coming.
And what is the waterfall?
So that's a restaurant that has a bar, and it's on in Canton on Washington Street.
Okay, so you've given your husband the stiff arm, so to speak, right? You're
Correct.
not going.
Not going.
So what happens?
So then he keeps on texting me. He's like, I'm at the waterfall. You should really come. It's fun. There's a band. And I was like, "Oh, really? Like, I don't want to go." And then my kids got involved with the conversation.
And how did that affect your decision?
So they started saying to me, "Mom, you never go out. You never do anything. You know, Dad's by himself. Just go, keep him company while he eats." So I reluctantly went.
All right, so you were guilted into it.
Guilted 100% into it.
All right, so where did you go?
So then I went to the waterfall.
Do you recall about what time it was that you got to the Waterfall Bar and Grill?
I believe I got there approximately 9:30 or so.
And when you first arrived there, who was there, if anyone, that you recognized?
So my husband was there, and then I recognized Jennifer and Matt McCabe.
And what happened after you got there?
So after I got there, I walked in, and I said to my husband, I'm like, "Where's everybody from the basketball team?" And he said, "I don't know. They all sort of split up." He said, "Don't worry. Just hang out here. I already ordered a sandwich, so just hang out with me while I eat, and then we'll go."
And were you introduced to anyone?
Yeah, so then Jennifer McCabe started introducing me to all her family, and so I got to meet a lot of them. It was fun. It was a good time.
And do you recall specifically who you met?
So I think I believe I met. Well, she sort of just introduced me to whoever was at the table. So I'm not sure 100%, but just like the niece, her sister, her brother-in-law, like people like that.
All right, the Albert family?
Correct.
And when you're being introduced to a bunch of people at once, it can be tough to keep everybody's names straight at the time?
Right, it's kind of overwhelming. There was a lot of Jen's family.
Now, what were you drinking that night?
So that night I drank water.
And
I mean, at this point, it's
the
like
whole
half a
time you
can
were at
really,
the
so-
waterfall, did you drink anything else except for water?
I only drank water that night.
Now, was there a point when you were going to leave the waterfall before they closed up for the night?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
Sure. You wound up leaving at a certain time, correct?
I never left.
Well, you left because you're in court today. You're not still at the waterfall.
Okay, correct.
So what I'm trying to get at is, at some point you left the waterfall, but was there a point before that where you were planning to go?
Correct.
Tell us about that.
So my husband had eaten, and I said, "You know what? I think I'm going to get going." And I was about to get going, and then John and Karen walked in.
Okay. And when you say John and Karen, you're referring to?
John O'Keefe and Karen Reed.
And why did that change your plans?
I was excited to see them. I liked Karen, so as soon as I saw her walk in, I was like, "Hey, I'm going to stay. I want to talk to her."
And what did you notice about John O'Keefe's mood when he arrived that night?
So John was very happy. His niece had just gotten into a private school called Bishop Fian, and that was like the first thing he was talking about. He was elated that she got in, and he was telling everybody about that.
And thereafter, how much interaction did you have with John and/or Karen?
Karen and I probably spent the entire night talking. Maybe give or take some time that we didn't, but the majority of the time, Karen and I were speaking together.
And if you had to estimate, how long a conversation did you have with Karen?
Dude, you just said the entire night.
Maybe an hour, like 40, 50 minutes out of the hour. Like if we spent like an hour together, perhaps we spoke 50 minutes of those out of that hour.
And without telling us the content of the conversation, what was the subject matter, if you remember?
So Karen she mentioned being excited about Kaylee getting into Bishop Fian. And when I first saw her, she first started talking about my daughter. So I saw her, she came in, she greeted me, and when we did start talking, she just started talking about my daughter and how much she really loved my daughter's relationship with John's niece.
Okay. And while you were having this conversation with Karen, was it an easy conversation back and forth?
Very easy.
Where were you located within the waterfall while you were having this conversation?
We were at a I don't remember where we were talking. We were sitting down talking at a table.
And how close did you get to her when you were speaking with her?
In order for someone to hear you, because of the band being so loud, we were probably a couple feet from each other.
And in what direction were you facing when you were speaking to her? And I'm talking in relation to Karen.
God damn it, Cokeberry. Your sister is your mother. Your brother is your father. You all pick one another. The Albert family. Fuck you, Cokeberry.
I don't remember if she was next to me at this point. She could have been next to me at this point.
All right. And your face would have been facing where?
At her.
Okay. That actually was the question. I'm sorry. This is kind of a stupid way to talk, but I have to ask the questions this way.
We were face to face.
There you go. All right. So in other words, Karen was also facing you when she was speaking to you?
Correct.
Did you notice what Karen was drinking?
So she was drinking a drink out of, it was a clear liquid out of a clear glass, and I assumed it to be alcohol of some sort, but I'm not sure.
And while you were talking with her, can you describe, was the conversation coherent?
Very coherent.
Was she making sense?
She was.
Was she engaged in the conversation?
She was.
And did you make any observations regarding her sobriety?
She seemed fine to me.
And you're a pharmacist, correct?
I am a
And
pharmacist.
you were that night.
I was that night.
How much interaction did you see that Karen had with John O'Keefe?
They had some interaction.
And was there one specific interaction that stands out in your mind, then and today? And I'm talking about a physical interaction.
When they hugged at one point.
Okay. And did John come over to Karen at one point and do something?
He did.
What did he do?
So John went over to Karen and he gave her a kiss on the forehead.
Okay. And that kiss on the forehead, why did that stand out to you?
So honestly, I'd never seen something like that before, a boyfriend do to a girlfriend in public. Never saw that. So it just stood out to me. I was like, wow, that's the sweetest thing I've ever seen.
Can we queue up Exhibit 22, Mr. Wolf?
Someone's not used to public displays of its
I'd like to go
affection.
to approximately
That's
11:36 and 41 seconds. And if we can, well, first of all, have you seen that video before me?
I have.
Do you recognize what Exhibit 22 depicts?
It shows the waterfall.
And is that consistent with what it looked like when you were there that night?
Correct.
And you've previously identified that as being a fair and accurate video of that night?
I do.
If we could zoom in, well, first of all, again, let me try and lay a foundation. Where would you be, if you recall, at the waterfall within that video? To the right, to the left?
I'm in the right, in a black top, sitting on a chair.
Okay, could we zoom in on that area, Mr. Wolf? Okay, we've zoomed in. Do you see yourself?
I do.
And where are you seated?
So there's a white jacket on the back of a chair. That's me.
And do you see anybody else in that video that you now recognize?
I see Brian Higgins.
Okay. And when you say Brian Higgins, is that somebody that you had known prior to that night?
I did not know Brian.
He was one of the people you were introduced to?
Correct.
And you since have learned, put the face to the body, or I'm sorry, I should say the name to the body or the name to the face?
Correct.
All right. And where do you see Brian Higgins?
He has like an emblem on the back of like a sweatshirt.
All right, so his back is to the camera?
Correct.
And we have not located that pointer, have we? Thank you, sir. May I approach you, please?
Yes.
Now, if you can, ma'am, would you please use that pointer to show where you are first?
That's me.
Okay. And Brian Higgins?
That's him.
All right. Do you recognize, at this point in the video, do you recognize anybody else?
Not right now.
Okay.
Not
if we
even
can
with
start to
somebody
play it
else's
with me.
mouth.
And stop for a second. I would ask you, as soon as you recognize somebody else, if you'd speak up and tell us to stop, and we'll pause.
Okay. So right there is Karen's head.
Okay. Is that the back of Karen's head, or?
Correct. So that's the back of her head.
All right.
And
And
then
by the way, just so the record's clear, over Mr. Higgins' shoulder, there appears to be a face looking forward on the right shoulder. You see that, right?
Correct.
You're not referring to that. You're referring to the long hair that's in back of that face.
yeah. Could I point to it
Sure.
again? Okay. So I'm referring to that head right there.
Understood. Okay. And
then-
I think you had said something else.
And then that right there is John O'Keefe with the hat.
Okay. There's a ball cap.
Correct.
And on the video, as we're looking at it, it's to the right, up the top. It's to the right of the PM chyron there.
Right
up
to the
top
right
of the screen.
Correct. Sorry.
If we could continue to play. Stop. What do you see?
So I see John giving Karen a kiss on the forehead.
Is that what you saw that night?
I did. I was looking right at them when it happened.
You were facing them.
I was facing them.
And what about Mr. Higgins? Where was he facing?
It appears that he's facing them as well.
That happened right in front of him.
That's what it looks like.
If we could play further. Okay, you can stop and we can take that down. Now, That night, did you have any information about the nature of Karen Reed's previous interactions with Brian Higgins?
None whatsoever.
Okay. How long did you stay at the waterfall, or if you recall about what time you got ready to leave?
I believe things wrapped up around midnight.
And with whom were you leaving around midnight?
So my husband and Matt McCabe stayed behind. They were helping the band clean up and stuff. So it was myself, Jennifer McCabe, and Karen Reed that walked out together.
Okay. And you've previously seen video footage of the end of the night with yourself, Karen, and Jennifer McCabe sort of in a grouping?
Correct.
Excuse me, I'm sorry that I just need to clear my throat. I hope that's the
okay.
last time.
That's okay.
Did you see on that same video at the same time, there's a grouping in another area of the bar at the same time?
Correct.
And do you recall who was in that grouping?
I believe it was Chris Albert, Brian Albert, and Brian Higgins.
Okay. Could we now publish again Exhibit 22? And I'd like from the approximate start time of 11:57 and 42 seconds. And if we could hit play, Mr. Wolf? Oh, I'll tell you what, stop it for a sec. Thank you. Could you zoom in, please, on the right portion of that video, the upper right? We'll start with that. Okay. So this is the start of this clip. It looks to be 11:57 and 38. Do you see anybody in that clip that you recognize?
Yes, so I am the person with the jacket with the fur around the hood, and Karen Reed is the other woman that I'm talking to.
We could play that, Mr. Wolf? And right now, do you recognize anybody else in the background of that?
So to the right in the plaid shirt is my husband, Nicholas.
Okay. What about over your left shoulder?
So over my left shoulder is John O'Keefe.
And does that appear to be his back?
Correct.
Okay. Can we play? And he was stop for a second. He was in your line of vision at that point, correct?
Correct.
What does he appear to be doing?
He appears to be like paying a tab or something like that, or maybe getting a drink. I'm not sure.
Okay. And do you see him looking in a particular direction right now?
He looks to be looking over his left.
Continue to play. Oh, if we could pause for a second. I neglected to ask you to point out with the pointer. We have
I'm
it
sorry.
now. We might as well use it.
Okay.
If you could point to yourself first.
Okay. So that's me.
All right. Karen.
That's Karen.
And John O'Keefe.
That's John.
Okay. Continue to play, Mr. Wolf. Stop. Back up just a sec. Oh. I'll tell you when to start. Yep. Play. Stop. Okay. Do you see what direction John O'Keefe is facing now?
He's looking to the left.
Okay. Keep going. Keep going. Stop. What direction is he facing now?
To the left.
And what is over to the left?
I believe that's where the other group of men are located, perhaps.
Okay. Keep playing. And I'd like to run this to 11:58:25. Stop. At this point, his whole body is turned to the left, correct?
Correct.
And he appears to be facing where the other group of men were?
I'm sorry, repeat that?
He appears to be facing in the direction of where the other group of men were?
Correct.
Continue to play, all through until 11:58:25. Okay, that's perfect. Now, keeping the video up, I'd like to now scroll over to the left side of the screen, and we're going to start that at 11:57:42, the same approximate time we started the previous discussion.
Okay, well, as it turns out, I don't know how to turn it off, but those of you that are members are automatically going to get your chats shown on screen irrespective of whether or not they're paid or not. It is official that super chats are the ones that will be getting voice to text. Otherwise, it's just going to show up on screen. I have no idea how to change that, so have at it.
Okay. You've previously described the other three men. Are you able to identify them on this video now in this still frame clip?
I believe I am
Okay.
able.
And who do you see?
I see Chris Albert, Brian Higgins, and Brian Albert.
And which one is which?
Chris Albert is the one that grabbed Brian Higgins' arm, and Brian Albert is with his back towards us.
Okay, now I'll ask you to use the pointer and point to Chris Albert, please.
That's Chris Albert.
On the right.
Yep.
Where's Brian Higgins?
That's Brian Higgins.
In the middle?
Yeah, in the middle. And that's Brian Albert,
Okay.
I believe.
And with regard to Brian Higgins, which direction is he facing?
He's facing the left.
He's facing to the left?
I mean, I'm sorry, he's facing to the right.
Okay. And the direction that he's facing in, who's over there?
Sustained.
What is over there? Is that the direction of the bar?
Objection.
Sustained.
Okay. Continue to play, please. Stop. Did you see he grabbed his arm a second time?
Correct.
And Brian Higgins is facing in which direction this time?
He's facing the bar area.
Continue to play, please. Okay. You noticed some motion that Brian Higgins made?
He waved his arm.
Back it up for a second, Mr. Wolf, please. Stop. Did you see a motion?
He put his left arm up.
Okay. Appeared to be summoning somebody?
Sustained.
Objection to this whole line.
Continue to play. I'm sorry, Your Honor. Continue to play. I'll bear that in mind. Okay, we can stop there. Ms. Kolakithis, did you see how many times Brian Higgins motioned with his arm?
Sustained. Commonwealth versus please, Mr.
Understood, understood. Now, prior to this night, had you known or been aware of Chris Albert?
Just knew him from seeing him at D&E Pizza.
Okay, and you say you've seen him at D&E Pizza in what capacity?
I think he's the owner there at D&E Pizza, and we've gotten pizza there before.
And you'd been in that establishment before?
Correct.
And with regard to Brian Albert, have you had any interaction with him, either that night or before?
So that night, I was introduced to him, and I think I even spoke to him a little bit there, and then maybe saw him like a basketball game. I don't remember him really prior to that night.
Okay. Now, I'd like to play the portion of the video where you are then leaving and ask you some questions about that. Yes, I think we can zoom out and perhaps hit play, Mr. Wolk, at this point. And pause for a sec. If you could use the pointer and just point out again where you are at this point.
That is me.
All right. And are you able to see Karen at that point?
She's right there.
Okay. And what about Jen McCabe? Are you able to see her at that point?
I'm not sure.
Okay. All right. Continue to play, please. And stop for a second. I should have asked you, if you do see Jennifer McCabe enter the picture, could you alert us?
Okay.
Continue to play.
Yeah, the waterfall does look pretty sad, honestly. And they need better camera placement. The damn date and time's covering half the patrons. What's the point of that? No shit. Well, good luck to the next.
Okay. When you can turn the lights back on. When you were leaving the establishment, whom did you leave with?
So again, it was myself, Jennifer McCabe, and Karen.
Did anything unusual occur when you were leaving?
So as we were leaving, Jen went over to Karen, kind of put her arm around her, and she started saying, "You're coming with me, you're coming with me." And Karen's like, "Huh? Like, what? Like, where are we going?" And
I'm going to sustain the objection.
The first part of that answer, the putting her arm around her, "You're coming with me," why did that stand out in your memory?
Just because I was there too, and it just was strange. It was just like, "You're coming with me." Like, it was just something that stood out to me.
You weren't included.
I mean, no, it's fine. I mean, it was just stood out, you know? Yeah.
Did Karen go with Jen McCabe?
No, she did not.
What did you see her do?
So then, out of the clear blue, thinking that Karen was going to go with Jen, I see Karen with John.
And where did you see Karen with John?
I saw them just I was parked across Washington Street, across from the restaurant, and I just saw Karen and John just like walking down towards what used to be Amber Road, a place.
It used to be Amber Road?
It used to be Amber Road, yeah.
Is that a Amber Road cafe?
Correct. It was like a restaurant. It was like a little cafe shop.
And did you figure out why they were walking in that direction?
That's where I think Karen had parked her car.
Did you have any concerns about Karen being able to drive that night?
I had talked to her all night, and I did not notice anything strange about her. Like, I didn't think anything of it.
And once you parted ways, where did you go?
I went in my car.
And what was your last image of seeing Karen and John that night?
It was just them walking towards the car.
If I may have a moment, Your Honor.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
All right. Mr. Brennan?
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Was your last image of Karen and John, both of them walking to the car and Karen walking to the driver's side door of that car?
Correct.
That night it was a celebratory mood?
Correct.
Everybody was getting along fine?
Yes, we were. Yes.
You were speaking to the defendant for some time?
Most of the time, correct.
You saw her at points hugging Jen McCabe?
Correct.
You knew John?
I did.
He was a kind man?
Very kind.
Generous?
Very generous.
Thoughtful?
Very thoughtful.
Soft-spoken?
Yes.
That night was particularly different. He was extraordinarily proud and happy, wasn't he?
Yes, he was.
And you could see him emote about his accomplishment that his daughter got into private school.
Correct.
Did you talk to John that night?
I did.
No further questions. Thank you.
All right, Ms. Kolakithis, you are all set.
Okay, thank you.
So why don't I see counsel regarding scheduling?
Oh, was that it? Oh, yeah, I'll be damned. Legit thought that there was gonna be more to that today.
All right.
And if they could just, or Paul, they could just go back maybe 10 minutes and we'll bring you right back. So.
All rise for the court, please.
What was that? We're gone for 10 minutes and we'll bring you right back. What? There's a motion at the end? Okay, cheers. I'm guessing it can't go for very long though. Yeah, it's kind of hard to have respect for the judicial office when this sort of shit happens, honestly.
back in session. Please be seated.
All right, jurors, I just realized that I probably made you go downstairs and up twice to just come back shortly. I'm sorry I inconvenienced you that way, but we were able to talk. I am assured not only are we on schedule, we are ahead of schedule. I understand tomorrow's supposed to be very hot. Court officers are concerned about how we're going to keep the fans and air conditioners going and be allowed to hear the witnesses. I've talked to the lawyers. Everybody's in agreement that because we're ahead of schedule, we give you tomorrow off. All right, so we won't be in session tomorrow. We will be in session Friday all day. So those same reminders, please do not discuss this case with anyone. Don't do any independent research or investigation into this case. If you happen to see, hear, and read anything about this case, please disregard it and let us know. And be careful with your social media use. We'll see you on Friday. Right.
All right.
All right.
Jury's exit the court, please be seated.
All right. Is there anything anybody needs to raise with me at this point?
No, Your Honor.
Okay.
There is one outstanding motion, the motion for reconsideration.
It's denied. Okay. All right. I just saw that was the one that was still outstanding. Okay. Thank you all. We'll see you Friday morning.
Fuck me. That was some bullshit. I don't really care if it's the only thing that's outstanding. Not during trial stream, Stingy.
Stingy said, watch the
'Cause
short
these are
I
going specifically into
sent. My new
playlists.
favorite page. Yuck.
Yuck. I'll have a look though. Daughter isn't the only one who's testifying about the school vaccine bills. Okay. You've used what happened. Quite literally, they apparently there was a motion that the defense put forward, and she just went, "No, denied." Maybe. I was going to have a look to see how far along they are with the actual live stream, whether or not they're on their customary... What are they? 3... Are we 5 minutes in? Oh, what the hell? Might as well. I'm not tired yet. I'll just keep allowing it to go for the moment. Motion for the missing witness. I think I have that right. Not sure though. Don't know what to tell you, honestly. Although I tell you what, there was that microdots video that got sent to me earlier. Where's...
You gotta understand something, dude. Microdots is a fucking force. Make no mistake that...
Okay, so apparently this is the cleaned up video. Yeah, I don't think Microdots is going to give any shit. But I will run it quickly in case the actual trial comes up. Which is why I should move that over there so I can keep an eye on it.
If this dude gets a hold of you, bro, once he picks up that set, he's not letting go.
Everything we experience is part of a chain. Every moment preceded by another. That's why in criminal investigations, detectives begin at the moment the crime occurred and work backward, piecing together what led up to it. closer an event in time and space to what happened, the more critical it becomes. In the Reed case, there exists a rare and invaluable piece of evidence. The waterfall video. A 75-minute continuous recording capturing the victim and the small group of people he interacted with before suffering fatal injuries. Rather than analyze its contents fully, investigators treated it as little more than a tool to tally Karen's drinks. Had they truly wanted to solve the crime, they would have done exactly what we are about to do.
Interesting. You have my attention.
It's nearly 2 minutes to midnight. At the waterfall bar, the Albert and McCabe party decide it's time to leave. They gather their belongings and start moving towards the door.
Holy shit, look how clear that is.
Chris Albert is being playful with Jen McCabe, hiding her jacket behind his back. He hugs his niece Caitlin goodbye, since he is not attending the after party.
I'm sorry, if Microdots was able to clean the video up this well, why the hell has no one in the trial done it? That's outstanding work.
John is facing the bar, attending to the check. Karen is engaged in conversation with Karina. Karina and husband Nick have remained supportive of her innocence since the beginning. On the date this occurred, they had known both John and the McCabes for years. As Brian Albert, his brother, Selectman Chris Albert, and ATF agent Brian Higgins move towards the exit, an interesting exchange occurs. We will watch the next 20 seconds uninterrupted, then break it down frame by frame. Let's watch again, looking closer, and try to determine what exactly is happening. Brian Higgins is looking in John's direction. Chris Albert says something to sister-in-law, Nicole, as she steps towards the door. Daughter Caitlin Albert is closest to the exit. Brian Albert enters frame right.
Yeah, you're probably not wrong there, Coke Fury.
Brian and Nicole continue. We see Higgins focused, like a laser beam on John. And Chris Albert's attention has now shifted directly onto Higgins, appearing to sense what he is about to do. Higgins goes to raise his arm and shout to the victim, but before he can even bring it above his waist, Chris Albert aggressively grabs his forearm, preventing it from happening. The significance of Chris Albert's actions cannot be overstated. They reveal clear prior knowledge, an unmistakable anticipation of hostility directed towards John. There is simply no other valid way to explain how Chris would know what Higgins was about to do before he did it. I'm not suggesting anyone intended to kill John, only that there had to have been prior discussion, if not some form of coordinated plan to confront him.
Holy crap.
Now, we can operate under the assumption that these three men know something about John's future that we do not. Chris grabs Higgins by the arm, turning him back around to face him directly. This unexpected outburst from his brother catches Brian's attention. And Higgins, whipping his head toward Chris, seems just as taken aback by the sudden hostility as we are. Notice that Chris is grasping Higgins' shirt so tightly that you can see tension in the fabric. And as much tension on his face. Chris pushes Higgins' arm down to his side. He fixes him with a hard, unflinching stare.
Okay, I think you might be overplaying it slightly now.
Chris releases his grip. Higgins turns his head toward Brian, deferring to his authority and seeking his approval. But Chris steps squarely in front of Higgins and puts both of his hands on him again. Higgins is rattled. Brian raises his palms facing upward, a universal gesture of confusion, questioning Chris's protest. Higgins continues to fix his gaze on John, peering over Chris's right shoulder. Meanwhile, Chris stands in a posture strikingly similar to that of a bouncer stepping in to defuse a confrontation. Higgins steps back and shifts his focus again to Chris, prompting Chris to release his grip on Higgins' left arm for the second time. Higgins stares blankly. The two men exchange a few words as Chris gestures towards the exit. Chris is trying to assert control over the situation. However, both men turn their attention to Brian Albert as he intervenes. Brian challenges Chris's position with his voice and body, causing Chris to throw up his arms in frustration. There's clearly a disagreement between the Albert brothers. It appears that Chris either disapproved of Higgins confronting John altogether, or he was uncomfortable with him doing it so publicly. I lean towards the latter. Ultimately, however, it is Brian who holds authority and makes the final decisions. Chris is overruled by his older brother. Higgins has the green light and is allowed to continue. Chris submits, but is still clearly on edge. As the brothers settle the matter with a few final words, Higgins presses on, shifting his focus back to John. Even with reduced resolution and a tight zoom, Higgins' agitation is unmistakable. He appears to be incensed, clearly gesturing, "Let's go." He briefly makes eye contact with Brian Albert, puts his hand to his forehead.
Yes, Benny, that's because he's using a picture of Nick as
Chris
his avatar.
guides Higgins towards the door, touching his back, using his body as a physical barrier. But Higgins isn't done. Chris watches him closely. Higgins remains preoccupied with John, while Chris maintains a stance resembling someone preventing a confrontation. Pay close attention to the next sequence of frames. You'll see Chris appear to say something to Higgins, likely a command such as go or okay. In response, Higgins shows clear defiance, stepping past Chris and openly calling out to John in full view of everyone. Here we go. Chris speaks, and puts his hand on Higgins' back to guide him out for the second time. Now, Higgins will react defiantly, ignore Chris, step past him, and attempt to get John's attention vocally, and by waving and pointing. Higgins defies Chris's instruction to get going. Chris is not happy with this. His stare is ice cold, and locked on Higgins. Higgins sidesteps Chris, and is animated. Then Chris turns to look at John to see what his reaction is. But John, still dealing with paying his tab, has seen nothing. Not yet.
And you didn't say goodbye to John, right?
I don't think I said goodbye to anybody.
And you didn't talk to him about coming over the 34th Fairview?
No.
Neither Brian Higgins, Chris Albert, or Brian Albert ever acknowledged what we are seeing with our own eyes. Now, picking up exactly where we left off, there's a few things that happen worth pointing out. First, we'll focus on Higgins. Let's watch it at normal speed, then take it frame by frame. And we'll sync it with a close-up of John to gauge his reaction. Now is a crucial moment to remind you, it's 11:58 p.m. In about 30 minutes, John will be fatally injured. Cue the tape. In 3, 2, 1.
What are the odds that there's a Tommy gun in that case?
Let's watch it again, slow it down, and look a wee bit closer. Higgins is desperately trying to get John's attention, but John still has his back turned. By the time John turns to look, Higgins has shifted his gaze to Brian Albert, likely pointing at Brian while telling John to go to his home at 34 Fairview Road. Then, as Higgins turns back toward John, he sees that John has already looked away, prompting Higgins to abort the next hand gesture he was just about to make. Higgins looks and sees members of the band carrying equipment out, then steps back to give them space to pass. Then, he finally makes direct eye contact with John. He points outside, telling John to come to Brian Albert's home. His posture rigid, and each motion he makes is laced with tension. John says something back to him, then glances over to Matt, who seems to have also witnessed the interaction. Consider how determined Higgins was to deliver the message to John. He endured a tense confrontation with Chris Albert, made multiple unsuccessful attempts to catch John's attention, and deliberately lingered behind the rest of his group, refusing to leave.
Okay. I will say this. Without knowing what was said, it is easy enough for, say, someone that's supporting the prosecution to turn around and say that he was just very eager to make sure that John went to the house because he wanted to play pool with him or because he was really drunk and wanted to talk to and potentially make a new friend. I don't know. Look, I can honestly say that I have dealt with people in real life that get quite like that when they're drunk. John was smiling because Piggy's a little something, because it's blocked out. I don't know. I kind of want more.
Until he was absolutely certain the message had been received. Karen and Karina were so deeply engaged in conversation that they remained completely unaware of everything that had just unfolded around them. John is smiling. Whatever message Higgins was trying to send, it clearly didn't land with the weight he intended. John appears relaxed and confident, an important detail, as this reflects his mindset just before he would enter 34 Fairview Road. John leans over to Matt, who is just out of view, likely making another comment about the outburst. then appears to say something about it to Chris Albert and Jen McKay before he is interrupted by the bartender to sign the check. In exactly 22 minutes sent from the crime scene, Higgins texts John a message that, viewed in context, takes on a sinister tone.
Hear ye, hear ye, hear ye.
That text
All persons
combined-
having anything to do before the Honorable Beverly Canoni, the Justice of the Superior Court, holding in dedum within and for the County of Norfolk. Draw near, give your attendance, and you shall be heard. God save the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. This court is in session. Please be seated.
Hi. Good morning, counsel. Good morning, Ms. Reed. And good
I'm
morning,
not intending to
jurors.
watch the whole thing.
Happy
I want to
Friday.
just fast through my model
I
of the
do
cam
have
before
to
my eyes
ask you
fall
those
out.
same
After that, I'm going to
three
bed.
questions. Were you all able to follow the instructions and refrain from discussing this case with anyone since we left yesterday, day before? Everyone said yes or nodded affirmatively. Were you also able to follow the instructions and refrain from doing any independent research or investigation into the case? Everyone said yes or nodded affirmatively. Did anyone happen to see, hear, or read anything about this case since we left the other day? No. Everyone said no or she. Okay, I understand we have a witness this morning.
We do, Your Honor. Permission?
Yes.
You would ask to join us, Dr. Dan Wolf.
Okay. But we'll see how. Thank you, Tony.
So, I've seen a lot about this chick, about how apparently she's related to one of John's exes, and how she posted things on Facebook and all that
So,
sort of
sir,
shit.
we're going to try and keep the air conditioning on this morning, so I'm
No
going to
idea
ask you
if
to
any of
speak
it's
really
accurate, but I'll pull it
loudly
up
into
later
that
and have a look.
microphone. And Mr. Jackson, you do so as well, please, okay?
Of course, Your Honor. Dr. Wolf, could you please state your entire name and spell your last name for the jurors, please?
Daniel Michael Wolf, last name spelled W-O-L-F-E.
May I inquire, Your Honor?
Yes.
Dr. Wolf, what do you do for a living, sir?
I am the director of accident reconstruction at a company known as ARCA, A-R-C-C-A.
And I'm going to start right off the bat. Get really comfortable with that microphone. It's adjustable. Pull it right close to the area of your chin. It's really loud in here.
Okay.
Dr. Wolf, you said you work for ARCA, A-R-C-C-A. What is ARCA?
ARCA is a forensic engineering consulting firm. We have a variety of disciplines: accident reconstruction, which is the group I'm a part of, biomechanics, failure analysis, and crashworthiness.
And you said that your title again, one more time?
The director of the accident reconstruction team.
And what sort of contracts does ARCA normally engage in routinely?
So in addition to our forensic consulting work, we have, going back in time, we've dealt with doing contracts with the Department of Defense, where we designed energy-absorbing seats for MRAP vehicles, mine-resistant armored protective vehicles, where these vehicles were going over explosive devices, and the energy from those explosions was going through the vehicle into the occupant. So ARCA designed energy-absorbing seats to help mitigate the injuries in that type of in those types of incidents. We also do work for the National Hockey League. I myself am part of that work. It has to do with scanning and analyzing player pads, but we certainly do impact testing and help set guidelines for player safety.
With regard to those MRAP vehicles, was that contract for the Department of Defense for the United States government?
Yes, sir.
For the military?
Correct.
Is ARCA both nationally and internationally recognized as a leader in accident reconstruction?
Objection. Sustained.
Does ARCA have a reputation, or let me ask it this way, does ARCA entertain or engage both domestic and international contracts and clientele?
Yes.
As the director of accident reconstruction, do you specialize in anything other than just accident reconstruction, anything having to do with human factors?
Yes, so my other specialties in addition to accident reconstruction are lighting and human factors.
What is, give us a 25-word overview of human factors. What is that?
So to give you a good example of that is, and again, this is a case that I commonly see, but let's say you're driving down the road at night, It's an unlit roadway. You're relying on your vehicle headlights to see the roadway ahead, right? And you've got a pedestrian that is entering the roadway. And you want to have an understanding based upon the lighting conditions, how much sky illumination there is, their clothing, right? When would a driver recognize that individual on the roadway? So that's where it starts from the vision aspect of human factors. Then we get into driver response, right? So the driver is presented with a hazard. So how do drivers typically respond? What are their actions and how long does that take to avoid and initiate a reaction?
That's human factors. Can you do the same thing and give us an explanation for accident reconstruction just in the broadest sense? What is that discipline?
I think a very simple definition of accident reconstruction is the application of physics and engineering science to collision events.
What role do you take as the director of accident reconstruction for ARCA as contracts come in or engagements come in?
Well, my scope in cases can vary greatly. As I just mentioned, I could have a case where I'm assessing the conspicuity of a pedestrian and a driver's response time. It could be a 50-car pileup on a highway, and I'm trying to figure out a sequence of events. It could be a rear-end collision where a seat back has failed in the vehicle and the occupant has sustained injuries, and we want to have an understanding of the crush, the damage, the forces. So, again, it can vary case to case.
Do you engage in reconstruction or attempt to engage in reconstruction of all sorts of passenger vehicles and commercial vehicles?
Yes.
What about motorcycles?
Yes.
Bicycles?
Yes.
Involving pedestrians and sometimes involving no pedestrians?
Yes, I see all types of collisions.
How many cases, if you have a number in mind, have you been a part of in terms of engaging in accident reconstruction broadly?
That's something that I don't track, but I've been with the company now for over 8 years. So at this point, if I had to estimate, it's well over 1,000 at this point.
What education, training, and background do you have that allows you to perform the duties that you've described for these jurors in terms of accident reconstruction and human factors analyses?
In terms of, are you looking at additional training?
No, let's start with your education. I want education, training, and background, but we can do them in order.
Okay, yeah, so we'll go back to 2012. I received a Bachelor of Science in Engineering from James Madison University, along with a minor in mathematics. Some of my courses included physics, statics, dynamics, thermodynamics, fluid mechanics, your engineering sciences. Subsequent to that, I then went on to pursue my PhD in electrical and computer engineering, with a concentration in electromagnetics and photonics. So my coursework while doing my PhD included optoelectronics, semiconductor physics, basically how to guide light on semiconductor devices.
Did you write a dissertation to get your PhD?
Yes.
What was the subject matter broadly of the dissertation that you drafted?
So my dissertation focused on a technology called smart glass. So you may have seen this technology where if you've seen a pane of glass that is transparent, somebody flips a switch and it goes opaque. That's a type of smart glass technology. So my PhD involved developing a new type of novel, what we coined optofluidic smart glass. So we are using geometric structures that we've optically designed to create a very reflective surface or medium, if you will. And then through the introduction of various fluids, we can then modulate the amount of visible light and electromagnetic energy that is passing through or being reflected.
You were working on an invisibility cloak. Not in the literal sense of Harry Potter, but those curved sort of electronic ones that you can see that people sit in front of themselves and it bends the light around them. Okay.
Reflected, so not just visible light, but also energy that you can't see. As part of that process, I ended up prototyping these structures with a 3D printer that was capable of printing 3D printable polymers. And as we kind of got towards the end of my work, we looked at how we could scale this up on a larger scale. And we ultimately ended up researching and doing tests with a material known as polymethyl methacrylate, which is PMMA or acrylic.
What relevance does PMMA play in terms of this case?
So with respect to this case, the outer lens and the clear plastic diffusers of the taillights on the Lexus are comprised entirely of polymethyl methacrylate, or that PMMA material.
The same material that was the subject of your dissertation.
Correct.
What additional training and experience do you have as it relates to accident reconstruction beyond your BS and your PhD?
So certainly the 8 years of work that I've had at ARCA has certainly trained and taught me a lot over the last 8 years. Like I said, I've seen hundreds of collisions, all different types of accidents. But in addition to that, I've continued to take courses through Northwestern University in crash reconstruction, human factors and lighting, heavy vehicle forensics, heavy vehicle EDR downloads, botched data retrieval and black box downloads, photogrammetry, so a number of continuing education.
Are you accredited as a traffic accident reconstructionist?
Yes.
By whom?
An organization known as ACTAR.
Is that a nationally recognized organization?
Yes, sir.
What does that stand for, ACTAR?
The Accreditation Commission for Traffic Accident Reconstructionists.
Are you trained in photogrammetry?
Seems fairly straightforward.
Yes.
What is photogrammetry generally?
So photogrammetry is the science of extracting and measuring information in a photograph. So you don't actually have to physically inspect something to be able to get information about its measurements or where things are spatially. You can do that from a photograph alone.
Is that an accepted methodology in the field of accident reconstruction to use photographs and or videos without actually having been at the scene during the course of the crash?
Absolutely. It's very common.
You mentioned Bosch. What is the Bosch crash data retrieval analysis? What is that generally?
So generally, most modern vehicles on the roadway now have what's called an airbag control module, or more commonly known as a black box, which can contain crash-specific data in a collision.
Are you a member of any professional societies?
Yes.
Can you describe those for us, please?
So I'm a member of the Society of Automotive Engineers, the National Association for Professional Accident Reconstruction Specialists, the Illuminating Engineering Society, and the Optical Society of America.
Is it fair to say that you've authored a number of peer-reviewed papers in the field of physics and or accident reconstruction?
Yes.
Can you describe that for us?
So my most recent publication in the field of accident reconstruction deals with vehicle control history records. Publications prior to that were focused primarily on my dissertation PhD work.
I think you testified that you have dealt with probably over 1,000 different types of cases. Are you able to estimate, of those 1,000 different types of cases dealing with accident reconstruction, how many of those or what percentage of those have involved pedestrians?
I don't know if I can give a percentage. I would certainly say it's the majority of my casework. As I mentioned earlier, given one of my specialties being in human factors and lighting, there's a direct correlation between time of day and pedestrian collisions. We certainly see a rise as sky illumination drops and the illumination levels go down. We're having to rely on artificial light sources. So given that occurrence happens in nighttime hours and low illumination, like I said, I certainly see many pedestrian accidents.
What types of pedestrian impacts have you been involved with in terms of your analysis or evaluations?
All different types, everything from pedestrians being run over, running into the side of vehicles, being hit by the front of a vehicle backing up in a parking lot into a pedestrian. So I've seen it from all sides of a vehicle.
What is kinematics? Can you describe that or explain that phrase or term?
I think a simple definition would just be the motion of an object or a body.
Have you done any testing as it relates to kinematics and the interaction between pedestrians and motor vehicles?
Yes.
How many times have you engaged in such an analysis?
Numerous times. We frequently and routinely do testing at ARCA.
You mentioned ARCA has several different disciplines within it. What are some of those different disciplines in addition to accident reconstruction?
So, as I mentioned, we have biomechanics and crashworthiness, and there's a few others. And I will note that it's very common in our casework that we will work together as a team. So to give you an example of that, I mentioned earlier about, that rear end collision, right? So let's just say we have a rear end crash, and there's crush and there's damage to the rear of the vehicle, and the seat back failed, which caused the driver to ramp up in the seat and ultimately hit their head on something and sustain an injury. So I myself, as a reconstructionist, will analyze the forces, the speeds, and the severity of the crash. The biomechanist will evaluate the mechanism for the injury based upon those crash forces. And the crashworthiness expert may analyze, okay, is there a better or stronger seat that may have held up in this crash?
Is it normal for you, as the director of accident reconstruction at ARCA, to work with others in the other disciplines that are housed under the umbrella of ARCA?
Absolutely, yes.
Is that a normal process for you?
Very common, yes.
As a matter of fact, it probably would be uncommon if you didn't do that, correct?
Depending on the kind of case, but yes, certainly wouldn't be uncommon.
Tell me about the testing that you've undertaken to determine forces that are at play in a given accident or an impact.
Okay. So to give you a simple example of it is, let's just say we have a sideswipe type collision where two vehicles sideswipe each other and a front bumper gets torn off or deflected, essentially, and there's some deformation to it. Right? We can do testing at ARCA to determine how much force does it take to bend that material so that we get the deformation that we have. That would be a good example.
Is there a specific type of testing, or is there varied types of testing that you've done and undertaken to determine the forces that would be, for instance, in your example, in that the forces at play in that sideswipe collision?
Yeah, absolutely. It would have been, again, as part of the test, we would be measuring the forces, we'd be measuring the displacement, we'd be able to calculate acceleration and things of that nature from that test data.
The tests that you undertake, are they generally accepted methodologies in the field of accident reconstruction?
Yes.
What are quasi-static tests?
So a quasi-static test would be like the example I just gave you, where we have basically the bumper would be stationary, right? And now we're pulling on it to determine how much force it takes to bend it. So that'd be an example of a quasi-static test.
So that test specifically is determining or attempting to determine the amount of force necessary to deform a bumper, for instance, in the way that it's seen after an impact.
Yes.
Or any other body panel, correct?
Correct.
And on the human side, also there are forces at play, I'm assuming, in terms of injuries that are sustained by pedestrians in the accident reconstructions that you've done involving pedestrians.
Yes.
Do you have experience in evaluating whether damage to a vehicle is consistent with a proposed scenario or set of facts?
Yes.
Describe those circumstances for us. What are the circumstances in which you're trying to determine whether or not the damage fits a proposed scenario?
So a case that commonly comes across my desk is we have two very different versions of how an accident unfolded according to party A and party B, right? And we have a set of evidence in terms of the damage to the vehicles, maybe some roadway evidence, right? So we can look at that objective evidence, utilize physics, maybe some calculations, determine whose version is most consistent based upon the damage and the roadway evidence.
Is that an accepted methodology in the field of accident reconstruction?
Yes.
In other cases in which you've undertaken such an engagement to determine whether or not the physics or the physical evidence matches a particular scenario or is inconsistent with that scenario, have you been able to ultimately reach conclusions and opinions to a reasonable degree of scientific certainty in those cases?
Yes.
Is that normally what you're seeking, to ultimately come to an opinion or a conclusion about those scenarios or circumstances?
Yes.
Are your opinions and conclusions based on your education, your training, the background and experience that you've explained to the jurors?
Yes.
Is it also in furtherance of the scientific methodologies that you employ in order to come to those opinions and conclusions?
Yes.
And are those generally accepted in the scientific and accident reconstruction community as a proper methodology to come to opinions and conclusions of that nature?
Yes, sir.
Have you been qualified in other courts to testify in the area of accident reconstruction?
Yes.
Let's talk about how you began your work in this particular case.
Careful.
When you were initially retained in connection with this case, were you hired by the defense?
No.
Did you know who we were?
Sustained.
What?
Your Honor, may we approach?
Yeah, you can ask it differently, Mr. Jackson.
Sure. Were you hired by anybody affiliated with the defense?
No.
At that time, did you know any of the names of the defense?
No.
At the time that you were hired to or engaged in this case, did you even know the name Karen Reed?
Objection.
Sustained.
Did you know any of the names or of any of the parties?
Objection.
Sustained. Aussie attack.
Sure.
I mean, look, I always knew that they were going to try and some way, somehow trick Brennan into opening that door so that they could mention that there was an FBI investigation. Again, this is why I hate the fact that there are no speaking objections, because I can't specifically say what the objection there was. Well, it's not even that they can't say the word, it's that it would seem that they're basically trying to say, oh, well, Arca had nothing to do with the defense whatsoever. So that it's in the jury's mind, well, who the hell actually engaged them then? Which, frankly, is a fair and reasonable fucking question. So... hang on, I'm gonna crack... It's been a while since I've done a late night trial stream, and I've actually had to crack a second can of Coke. But hey, at least it's not a V, I suppose. But, I'm trying to think what the objection would have been there. See, again, this just screams to me of Bev covering their asses. That's all it appears to be to me. Did you like my photo I sent you? Which one was that? Oh, yeah, the one you sent. Door's been open, I think, as a female cop mentioned the FBI. I know it's a bit weak, but I still think it's there. It hasn't been open sufficiently in terms of the fact that the FBI were engaging in investigation. The fact that the FBI were involved at any point, I would say yes, at a very preliminary level and a very, very rudimentary level has been opened. I don't think it's enough to for them to question Arca about who they were engaged by and why they're there. Doing great Bev side impressions. I've been practicing. I got to do something during these sidebars. I'm used to being able to skip over this shit.
When you were initially hired to look at the facts and circumstances of this case, did you do so independently? In other words, were you given a series of facts and a series of data and asked, just look at these facts and look at these data and make a few determinations about accident reconstruction in this case?
Yes.
What were you asked to do specifically?
It was to look at that evidence that we were provided and determine whether or not the damage to the vehicle was consistent with the injuries to Mr. John O'Keefe.
At the time that you were asked to engage in this independent analysis, were you provided information or data?
Yes.
Who at ARCA was assigned to the team that would ultimately engage in this particular analysis?
It was myself, Dr. Andrew Rentschler, and Scott Klein.
Describe what the materials were that you were provided in your initial assessment of this case.
Could I refer to my report?
With the court's permission.
I'm going to laugh so hard if he just organically mentions the fact that details were provided.
Would you like me to
them
just go
by
in
the
order
FBI.
from the materials reviewed?
That would be fine.
The Norfolk SPDU homicide death report. The Commonwealth of Massachusetts Department of State Police crime scene report. OCME dispatch removal report. Photographs of the incident location, videos of the incident location, photographs of the 2021 Lexus LX 570, photographs of recovered evidence, crash data retrieval report from the 2021 Lexus LX 570, report of autopsy photographs, and there was a few other items there, but those were generated internally.
There were about 14 things that were listed in terms of categories of information that you were provided, or ARCA was provided, is that right?
A little less than that, because some of those, like I said, were internally generated, but yes.
Why were you provided that data? What's the reason why it's important for you to get certain data as you begin your analysis?
Well, we wanted to have an understanding of, or ultimately the entity that retained us wanted to have an understanding of what, I guess, the evidence that we would need to reconstruct this.
Did you get enough information to engage in a fulsome analysis, an accident reconstruction, in terms of the initial request by the entity that hired you?
Yes. In terms of our scope, yes, we had sufficient information.
Were you able to review photographs of not only the Lexus involved, but John O'Keefe's body?
Yes.
Did you use those photographs in furtherance of your analysis?
Yes.
Did you?
How do you know we're live? Penis!
Use the reports detailing scenarios or possible scenarios
joke's never
in
not
furtherance
funny
of your
to me.
analysis?
From what I recall, I don't believe any of the reports indicated any type of theory or understanding of how the accident occurred.
Were you asked to determine whether or not certain scenarios could be possible?
I don't recall them giving us any scenarios to evaluate. They essentially left it in our hands. Here's the evidence. What do you think happened?
That was an open question, correct?
Correct.
All right. Did you engage in an analysis that basically allowed you to think of any scenario?
I think that's fair, yes.
In your initial analysis, did you note damage to the vehicle?
Yes.
Describe the damage. Let's start with the vehicle. Describe the damage that you noted in furtherance of your analysis.
The primary damage was to the right rear taillight on the quarter panel section. The majority of the outer red lens was broken and shattered, as well as some of the underlying components and diffusers that are underneath that outer layer, as well as some damage to the back portion of the taillight.
Can I stop you right there? Describe when you say the outer lens material and some interior material as well was damaged. Describe that in detail for us.
So the outer lens is red, and it's about 5 millimeters in.
If they did just outright say it, and for example, if Jackson just decided to say, "Hey, Your Honor, I think that the door's been sufficiently open to whether or not the FBI were investigating Trooper Proctor for his conduct in this case." I mean, I don't think there's any way around a mistrial at that point, but Jackson sure wouldn't be back for the retrial.
In thickness, and it basically encompasses the majority of that quarter panel taillight, and then there's a small segment that is clear that is for the turn signal indicator, which is yellow. Underneath that 5 millimeter thick red lens, there are additional diffusers that run along the bottom. There's two rows of those, I believe, and then they also go up vertically on the side, and those are clear. And I think the thicknesses of those are about 3 millimeters.
Is 5 millimeters of PMMC, have I got that right? PMMA?
You call it acrylic. That's the more common name.
Easier for me. Is 5 millimeters of that acrylic, that outer lens material, is that considered thick or thin in terms of just sort of what we'd see on a taillight?
I would describe that as a pretty thick piece of plastic. It's certainly by no means. You can't, if you had a segment of it and you try to bend it, it's not going to bend.
In addition to that outer taillight material, that acrylic. In terms of the information that you received, did the interior acrylic also have damage to it?
Yes, those clear diffuse.
See, kids, this is why we don't open plastic bags with our teeth. I'm fairly confident I just got a piece of egg stuck in between my teeth. Shit.
Users that, again, there's 2 rows of those, and they also went up vertically.
Jason, Jay said as a former mechanic, I still maintain the entire red plastic was forced apart from the adhesive that welds the plastics together.
And I will take your word on that, Jason, because you've helped me out of more than a single spot, so...
Those were shattered and broken as well.
Was that important to you in your ultimate analysis?
Yes.
Did you note any superficial scratches or dents anywhere on the tailgate area or the liftgate area?
Yes, there was a dent and some paint chips, if you will, above the liftgate taillight assembly. So again, that next to that quarter panel taillight, there's another assembly that is on the liftgate, and there was a small dent and some paint chips at that area. There was also on the wraparound section of the bumper cover, as it's going from the rear to the right side, there were some superficial scrapes in that area.
Did you note any other damage or deformation to the Lexus? Deformation in the the liftgate, the bumper, anything like that?
No.
Is it common in a vehicle-pedestrian collision that there is some sort of bumper deformation that's associated with a vehicle-pedestrian incident?
That can certainly occur if a pedestrian is in an normal upright position. You can certainly get displacement of the bumper.
Did you see any displacement or panel deformation on the Lexus?
No.
Is it more common that there's panel displacement or deformation if the collision is above, say, 10 or 15 miles an hour?
Yes.
During your review of all the investigative materials, did you note any items of evidence that were recovered or claimed to have been recovered on the bumper itself?
I recall there were 2 or 3 apparent glass fragments.
What's the significance of that? Let me ask it differently. Is there any glass in the taillight assembly?
Can you repeat that question for me, Mr. Jackson?
May I ask that again?
Yes.
Is there any glass in the taillight assembly?
No.
Was there any shattered glass anywhere on the Lexus? Meaning panes of glass, the back window, quarter panel windows, anything like that?
No.
Did you have any understanding at that time of what the Commonwealth's theory of the case was when you began your initial analysis?
Sustained.
Did you have any indication of what the Massachusetts State Police theory of the case was based on the investigative reports that you had received?
Sustained.
Did you perform an accident reconstruction analysis to determine whether or not the damage to the Lexus, that taillight housing material, was consistent with an interaction with a pedestrian?
Yes.
Specifically, did you perform an accident reconstruction to determine whether the damage to the Lexus was consistent with an interaction with John O'Keefe based on the injuries that you were aware of?
Yes.
Did you evaluate whether the investigative theories regarding... Let me ask it a different way. Did you consider the possibility of Mr. O'Keefe's head striking the taillight?
Yes.
Did you consider the possibility of Mr. O'Keefe's arm striking the taillight?
Yes.
Did you entertain the possibility that Mr. O'Keefe's center of mass, his body, struck the taillight?
Yes.
Before we get into the initial testing, were you able to come to opinions and conclusions concerning those things that I've just mentioned?
Yes.
Did you also entertain the possibility that a drinking glass could have damaged the taillight?
Yes.
Were these some of the things that you were sort of, it was left open to you to decide yourself?
Yes.
Did you later provide all of those opinions and conclusions in a report to the entity that hired you?
Yes.
And your understanding that those reports were then later supplied to both sides here in this case?
That was my understanding, yes.
Did you testify about those initial testing opinions and conclusions at a proceeding last year?
Yes.
Let's talk for a second about that initial testing that you conducted in connection with this case. When approximately did you begin your testing? And I'm going to phrase it as your initial testing, the testing that you testified to about last year. When did you start that initial testing?
From what I recall, it would have been late 2023 into early 2024.
I want to talk about the drinking glass first. Did you become aware that there was a drinking glass that was found at the scene?
Yes.
And what was the testing that you sought to determine as it relates to the drinking glass and the taillight?
So looking at the evidence, as I mentioned earlier, when we're looking at that quarter panel taillight, we have an isolated region of damage. And looking at the additional evidence in terms of a broken drinking glass at the scene, we wanted to do testing to determine if a small object or projectile such as the drinking glass could induce damage that was consistent with that we saw on the subject Lexus.
Were you able to reach an opinion and or conclusion as it relates to whether or not there is a possibility that the drinking glass or a drinking glass could cause the type of damage that you saw on the Lexus?
Yes.
Given everything else in your investigation, are you concluding that the glass was responsible for the taillight damage?
No.
However, you did seek to determine whether it was possible, correct?
Okay. Sustained.
I'll ask it a different way, Your Honor. What testing did you undertake in furtherance of that specific, answering that specific question? Could the glass damage the taillight?
Right. So we designed a pressurized cannon that was capable of firing the drinking glass into the taillight at various speeds. We aimed for speeds of 30 and 40 miles an hour. Our achieved speeds were at 31 and 37 miles per hour. And we found that in the 37 mile an hour impact, and again, this is to emulate or simulate an individual throwing a drinking glass. The purpose of the cannon, if you will, was to be able to hone in on a speed precisely and obviously aim for that target. So it would just serve as a means of getting that projectile to the taillight in a means that we could measure it. And what we observed in the 37 mile an hour test is that we got damage that was generally consistent with that of the subject taillight, and that there was a large portion of the outer lens that was shattered and fractured, as well as the underlying clear plastic diffusers and chrome piece.
Tell me a little bit about the methodology that you undertook, the scientific methodology in building that pneumatic cannon and aiming that glass directly at the taillight.
Absolutely. So, as I mentioned, it was a customized cannon, if you will. It had a barrel that was capable of fitting a rocks or an old-fashioned drinking glass in it, and that's a glass that has a thinner sidewall, if you will. I think the glass was about 3 inches in height or so, maybe 3.5 inches, with the bottom portion being solid glass or just a thick piece of glass. So we were able to design a kind of a holder for it, if you will. Almost, you could really think of it as stuffing an actual cannon with a cannonball. So we literally would put the drinking glass in the cannon. There was a pressurized vessel behind that we would open up a valve rapidly, and when it was set to a certain pressure, that would determine the exit velocity that it would leave the barrel at. And we were able to aim that device into the taillight at those specified speeds to be able to determine what would the damage pattern be when we fired that glass.
This is a guy that loves his job.
Were you able, in this scientific experiment, to control for aim and trajectory?
Yes.
Were you able to control for velocity?
Jackson's reiterating. Were you able to, during this scientific experiment where you fired a glass out of a cannon,
velocity or exit speed of the glass?
Yes.
Were you able to control for damage patterns as it pertained to both the glass as well as the taillight at which it was aimed?
I don't know that we have had control over that. Ultimately, physics takes over after that interaction occurs. I can't influence how that material is going to perform or how the glass will break, per se.
It's a poor question on my part. Were you able to, or did you undertake to memorialize the damage pattern that you saw on the taillight and the glass as the glass was projected into the taillight?
Yes.
All right. Did you do that through photographs?
Yes.
High-speed video?
Yes.
And all of that was memorialized in your report?
Correct.
Your Honor, may I approach?
Yes.
I'm handing you two photographs, or two 8.5 by 11 documents that contain two photographs each. Can you take a look at those two documents and tell me if you recognize those?
Yes.
Does one represent, you mentioned that one of the tests that you performed was at 37 miles an hour, correct?
Correct.
Did you mention the speed at which, or the velocity at which the other test was done?
If I didn't, it was 31 miles per hour.
All right, so 31 and 37. Do you see those two documents in front of you?
Yes.
Does one of them represent the 31 mile an hour test and the photographs associated with that?
And an extracted frame from the high speed, yes.
Okay, and does the other one represent the other test, the 37 mile an hour test?
Yes.
If we could take those one at a time. May I approach one more time? Okay.
It's a good point. Did he fire the cannon while dressed as John?
If I could ask that these be marked as next in order, one at a time, 31 mile an hour test, and hand it to the corner with the court's permission.
So there's no objection?
None, thank you.
Okay.
Is it 213?
I'm sorry.
213?
I mean, to be fair, how the hell do you object to that?
Represents the 37 mile an hour test.
Is it 214?
Court's permission, I'd like to exhibit 213. I'm sorry, present exhibit 213.
Okay.
Is this the photograph that was just marked as exhibit 213 that's in front of you?
Yes.
Can you explain to the jurors what they're looking at?
So on the left part, you are looking at a frame from the high-speed video just after the contact with the taillight. On the right, you're looking at the post-damage to the taillight after the glass had been fired into it.
And if we could look at the next exhibit with the court's permission.
Okay.
And what are we looking at here?
Same thing on the left. Again, this is the 37 mile an hour test. The glass striking just in the area where the bottom of the turn signal indicator is, so the right where it meets the red portion of the lens and the clear portion of the lens. That's about where the impact point was. You could see that a large portion of the outer red assembly, lens cover is missing and fractured. The clear portion of the part of the outer lens to the turn signal indicator is also fractured, as well as the underlying clear diffusers in that assembly.
Would your testing in both of these scenarios, the 31 mile an hour test and the 37 mile an hour test, represent an accepted methodology for controlling for aim, velocity, impact site, and those issues, if you will, as it relates to testing of this sort?
Nah,
yes, we were able to control those variables.
And is that an accepted methodology in the area or the field of accident reconstruction?
Absolutely, yes.
When you finished your testing, were you able to make a determination as to whether or not either one of these velocities, the 31 mile an hour velocity or the 37 mile an hour velocity, were consistent with the damage that you saw on the subject Lexus, which is the 2021 Lexus belonging to Ms. Reed?
Yes, from the 37 mile per hour test, we are getting damage that's generally consistent, and that I mentioned we have portions of the outer lens missing, the underlying diffuser. There was also some fracturing on the backside of the assembly. So again, we observed damage that was generally consistent with that of the subject taillight.
And that was the 31 or the 37?
The 37.
The 37. What about the 31?
Didn't have enough energy to create that damage.
So were you able to conclude, in your opinion, whether or not the velocity of that glass hitting the taillight would have to be somewhere in the vicinity of 37 miles an hour, well above 30 miles an hour?
Well above, and it certainly could have been above 40 miles per hour per se. I mean, we may have actually blown out more of the outer lens had the speed increased.
Did you have any information
24 miles an hour
in
theoretically might
the
not be
data
enough
or
to
documents that you
even
reviewed
done it in the
associated
first
with this
place?
case, for instance, that John O'Keefe had a pneumatic cannon with him out there?
No.
Okay. So obviously, well, let me ask a different way. Based on this series of tests, were you concluding that the damage on the taillight conclusively was the product of a glass being hurled into the taillight?
Objection.
Sustained.
Were you concluding, or did you opine, that the damage to the taillight came from a drinking glass?
No, I gave an opinion that the damage was generally consistent with that in the test, compared to the subject taillight.
But only in the circumstance where the glass is being hurled at 37 miles an hour, correct?
Sustained. Can I ask it differently?
Under what circumstance did you determine that it was consistent with the drinking glass?
If that drinking glass, again, the purpose of the test was to do a test to evaluate or simulating somebody throwing a drinking glass at the taillight. So that's what that test was to demonstrate.
Understood. Let's turn to another test that you undertook regarding the head injuries that you became aware of. Did you become aware of, in the data that you received, that Mr. O'Keefe had suffered head injuries to the back of his skull?
Yes.
What sort of testing did you do to determine whether or not and under what circumstances that head injury may be connected or associated with the damage to the taillight?
We performed a drop test with a hybrid 3, so that's an instrumented anthropomorphic test device to be able to measure the accelerations on a head form and observe the damage to an impact to the taillight.
What is an ATD, anthropomorphic test device?
So it's a device that's commonly used in our field, and it's certainly approved by the federal government to evaluate crash forces and occupant kinematics, or I should say occupant crash forces. So it's a device that reconstructionists and biomechanists typically use or commonly use to be able to evaluate, like I said, whether it's forces in a motor vehicle, or let's say you have something being dropped on somebody's head or an impact to somebody's body part, right? We can use that instrumented dummy to evaluate and measure the acceleration and the forces.
Another word or another phrase often used in association with ATD devices are crash test dummies, correct?
Correct, yes.
Why was it important to do a drop test?
So we wanted to have an understanding based upon the fact that Mr. John O'Keefe had a skull fracture to the back of his head, whether or not an impact, a direct impact between the taillight and the back of his head could have caused that skull fracture.
What did your testing indicate?
When we did the test, the impact to the taillight was at 15 miles per hour, and we observed that the damage to that taillight was significantly more than the subject taillight at the 15-mile-an-hour speed. Furthermore, it did not generate, according to my colleague, Dr. Rentschler, enough forces to cause a skull fracture.
So ultimately, what was your conclusion related to the taillight potentially striking John O'Keefe in the head at above 15 miles an hour?
From a damage perspective, it was inconsistent.
Inconsistent.
Correct, inconsistent.
Did you consider temperature and control for temperature in any of your testing?
Yes.
Why is that important?
Well, that will affect how that, we've talked a lot about that acrylic material of the lens. That will certainly affect how it fractures, so we absolutely controlled the temperature during these tests.
How did you control for temperature?
So we had them sit overnight in chest freezers to get them to the desired temperature, which for our original set of testing was at 28 degrees Fahrenheit. We then rapidly moved them to our test fixture, and then they were fired almost immediately after that.
And when you're talking about them, you're talking about exemplar taillights?
Correct, yes.
Are those exact replica taillights that you would find on the 2021 Lexus SUV?
Yes.
After your testimony in the first proceeding last year in the spring of 2024, were you ultimately contacted by the defense in this case?
Yes.
When were you contacted by the defense?
I know that I had reached out to you, I believe it was in February of this year, because I think I saw some things in the media and was just wondering what was going on.
Sustained. Just when? Just a date, Dr. Wu?
I don't know if I could give a specific date. If I had to estimate, sometime in February or March, probably.
Were you still under contract with the other entity that hired you?
Sustained.
At some point, you and I spoke, correct?
Correct.
And that was, you believe it was February of 2025?
Yes.
Had we spoken at all between the end of your testimony at the proceeding last year and February of 2025?
No, that was the first time.
Did I ask you anything about retaining you?
Not at that time, no.
At some point, subsequent to that initial discussion in February of 2025, did we have another discussion about the potential of retaining you?
Yes.
Tell me about that. When was that?
From what I recall, it was sometime in March, and we were trying to figure out.
I think the issue with that question is that it gives the inference that the feds were still investigating. It's more just they're trying to protect it in case it comes out later on down the track, because there's a half decent chance that that particular door gets blown wide open. There's also the argument over when the defense actually contacted and when they were supposed to be getting paid from and all that sort of stuff. So basically, that was just a free throw for Bev to knock back against them.
Sustained. Next question, please.
Did I ask you if you were available to be retained by the defense?
Sustained.
May we approach?
Okay.
That was always going to happen. Would it be a workable loophole to call in the Fed who hired this guy as a witness since they can't ask about it? No. There's no way in hell they allow, there's no way in hell they allow it. And I think that's part of the reason why they didn't allow Michael Easter to testify as well. Because there's a reasonable line of inquiry there where they could say, so how did the FBI go about doing this? So would it have been reasonable for, say, the FBI to have hired Arca? And I've just realised we're not actually live, so I can skip ahead a little bit and hopefully skip over some of this sidebar. No, apparently not. Oh well. Rule 14 shit, yeah. It's almost like engineering and physics. It's almost like engineering and physics are an exact science, despite Aperture claiming otherwise. That's a good point. I mean, these guys are being very clear and precise in what they said they were doing, irrespective of whether or not they built an oversized potato cannon to shoot a cocktail glass at a car. Honestly, I think that's quite clever, the fact that they've managed to sort that out. So.
May I inquire?
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, Dr. Wolf.
Oh, don't you start getting snippy.
Ultimately, in March of 2025, were you hired by the defense?
Yes.
Okay. Were you asked to do anything or to review anything from the Commonwealth and any of their experts in relation to testing that was undertaken by them regarding the Lexus and Mr. O'Keefe?
Yes.
What were you asked to do?
My understanding is that we were asked to review and evaluate the report and analysis conducted by Dr. Welcher.
Did you receive Dr. Welcher's reports?
Yes.
Did you receive his raw data?
Yes.
Did you receive his 140-plus page PowerPoint?
Yes.
And did you undertake a review of that, all of that data, in order to evaluate that data?
Yes.
What methodology did you undertake at that juncture before you began any testing? Just your review process. What methodology did you undertake in terms of your review of his evaluation and his opinions and conclusions?
Well,
Stingy said FBI rules. Google FBI rule 34 inches for more info.
I can't take you anywhere, can I?
I think when reviewing his report and his analysis, I look to his opinions, and then I look to what's the basis and the foundation to those opinions, right? How did he ultimately arrive at those final conclusions? So I'm looking for the methodologies that he followed, what testing did he do, what type of experiments, what type of data analysis, ultimately to provide that opinion.
Ultimately, did you prepare a PowerPoint presentation in furtherance of memorializing your review and opinions and conclusions of his evaluation and testing?
Yes.
Did you bring that with you today?
Yes.
Do you have that with you on your computer, or are we going to run the PowerPoint?
It's on this computer up here with me.
With the court's permission, could Dr. Wolf present his PowerPoint presentation?
Okay.
No, I haven't hamstrung the defense enough. He's not allowed to present a PowerPoint.
That I believe represents the PowerPoint. Do we have this marked?
Yes, is this coming into evidence? All right, so we'll mark it for identification.
We can mark it for identification for the time being and discuss it.
And of course, Brennan's going to try and object to his report.
BDB for identification.
I know I
May I
shouldn't be
proceed,
shocked
Your
by
Honor?
that,
Yes.
but, you know.
Dr. Wolf, do you see what's displayed or presented up on the TV screen?
Yes.
All right. Do you have with you, by the way, just a matter of housekeeping, something called a spotlight?
Yes.
Something that can do whatever spotlight does that?
Yep.
Okay.
Yes.
I may ask you to employ that, or I may take it from you at some point as we're discussing this. Do you recognize what's on the screen?
Yes.
What is this?
This is my PowerPoint with just the first page, the title.
If we can move to the next slide, please. Describe what we're looking at in this slide.
This is from Dr. Welcher's PowerPoint presentation, slide 121, in which he's indicating that there are lacerations on John O'Keefe's right arm and forearm. And he's indicating in this slide that the location and orientation of the lacerations on John O'Keefe's right forearm and arm are consistent with the geometry and orientation of the right rear taillight of the Reed 2021 Lexus LX 570.
In coming to your opinions and conclusions, and I know this is a mouthful, did you consider the opinions and conclusions of Dr. Welcher in conducting your analysis and your ultimate testing?
Yes.
Did you rely on Dr. Welcher's report and his PowerPoint in reaching your conclusions and opinions ultimately
The
in
second
this
channel
case?
isn't running, so the chat that's showing on the screen should just be the main
I don't know
channel.
that I relied on it. Certainly, I utilized them to have an understanding of what his basis was for his opinion and what his opinion was. Ultimately, at ARCA, we did our own independent testing to evaluate that.
So just to be clear, I'm not asking Dr. Wolf if you agreed with his opinions and conclusions. I'm simply asking, did you rely on those in order to come to your opinions and conclusions? Did you incorporate them?
Sustained is to.
Did you agree ultimately with Dr. Welcher's opinions and conclusions?
Sustained.
You certainly were aware of what his opinions and conclusions were, correct?
The form, Mr. Jackson, on that one.
Were you aware of Dr. Welcher's opinions and conclusions?
Yes.
Are some of those opinions and conclusions represented in your PowerPoint?
Yes.
Are some of them represented on this slide in your PowerPoint?
Yes.
You indicated that this slide indicates that the location and orientation of the lacerations on John O'Keefe's right forearm and arms are consistent with the geometry and orientation of the right rear taillight, correct?
Correct.
Are the injuries to John O'Keefe's arm lacerations?
That would be an opinion for my colleague, Dr. Rentra.
Have you ever heard the phrase abrasion?
Yes.
In your opinion, are the injuries to John O'Keefe's right arm better described as lacerations or abrasions?
I don't have an opinion on that.
Okay.
See, this is smart.
Slide number 2, please.
That's a good way to answer. That's a good way to be a good witness.
Based on your review of Dr. Welcher's reports and his data, what testing did Dr. Welcher undertake or conduct?
So he did, initially it appeared that he did a static test, if you will, just demonstrating holding his right arm out adjacent to the rear taillights on the right side of an exemplar.
But then he did this weird fucking thing where he painted his arm, and we didn't really know what to do with that.
Our Lexus to demonstrate his theory of how the arm contacted the taillight.
What is a static test?
So I'm sustaining that. Ask it differently, Mr. Jackson. And I'm going to strike that. Mr. Jackson.
Of how the arm contacted the taillight.
What is a static test?
So I'm sustaining that. Ask it differently, Mr. Jackson. And I'm going to strike that.
Adjacent to, if you will. So he did
undertake or conduct reports and his data. What testing did Dr. Welcher undertake or conduct?
Okay, so because he's only got the reports to go on, he can't say specifically what he did or didn't do. He can only refer specifically to what appears in the report. So the question should have been, based on the information provided in the report, what do you believe the actions taken were?
So he did, initially it appeared that he did a static test, if you will, just demonstrating holding his right arm out adjacent to the rear taillights on the right side of an exemplar Lexus to demonstrate his theory of how the arm contacted the taillight.
What is a static test?
So I'm sustaining that. Ask it differently, Mr. Jackson. And I'm going to...
I'll be honest. Hello, Jude.
Jude Curio said friend.
I'll be perfectly honest. We couldn't see that, but based on the delay, I'm thinking there might have been some signaling going on there. Because she was pretty quick to sustain that objection, but he was very slow off the mark, working out exactly what he wanted to say there.
Strike that.
What testing did you note that Dr. Welcher did with regard to this?
It wasn't asking the static question. It was that was how long Brennan took to make the objection. Because then he said, and I moved to strike the answer. So
particular photograph. What is a static test?
Well, in a static test, that neither the arm or the vehicle is moving. It's just he's aligning his right arm adjacent to show how his arm aligns to the geometry and the dimensions of the Lexus.
Did Dr. Welcher appear to be wearing similar clothing as John O'Keefe was wearing on January 29, 2022?
Yes.
Was there any significance or purpose for that, in your opinion?
No.
In this test, no.
You can see it in the way that he responded to that too. He's like, no, we thought it was batshit crazy.
Did you identify any limitations with regard to this sort of testing undertaken by Dr. Welcher?
Well, it's very basic in that the only thing that this demonstrates is that you can get your right arm to align with the taillight. Beyond that, it doesn't tell you anything with respect to what happens to the arm when it makes contact with the taillight, right? What's the motion of the arm? What's the damage to the taillight? What's the acceleration of the arm? What's the forces of the arm? So it doesn't answer any of those other questions. The only question it answers is, does the arm align with the taillight?
So it's a very little scientific value.
John O'Keefe was 6'1", correct?
Correct.
Is the only person... Let me ask it a different way. Can only a 6'1" person align their arm?
Oh, son of a...
Taillight?
No, the arm is adjustable, so certainly people of different heights could also meet that alignment as well.
Just by pivoting your arm a little bit, right?
Sustain.
How would you describe the ability of somebody 5'7" or 6'3" being able to align their arm with the taillight?
Just changing the orientation and the posture of your arm.
Was there any scientific significance, in your opinion, of this particular test?
Again, other than just demonstrating that it aligns with it, no, nothing beyond that.
Next slide, please. What are we looking at here?
So this is an extracted frame from one of his dynamic tests in which
Everything that guy just said is bullshit. Thank you.
the vehicle is moving at about 2 miles per hour into his arm, making contact with his hand, his forearm, and his elbow.
What is a dynamic test as it relates to a static test?
So that's when something's in motion, and in this instance, it's the Lexus moving at about 2 miles per hour into his arm.
Did Dr. Welcher explain what the purpose of this test was?
From what I recall, I think it was to demonstrate that when his arm makes contact with the taillight, he observed paint transfer in the general location that there were the abrasions or the lacerations on his arm.
Did he appear to paint the taillight?
He did, yes.
Do you see that Dr. Welcher appears to be wearing an orange T-shirt?
Yeah. Sustained.
What is he wearing?
Appears to be an orange T-shirt.
Is that similar to what was described as being, as John O'Keefe having worn that night on January 29th, 2022?
Yes.
Is there any significance to wearing that T-shirt?
No.
Not that I can think of, no.
Did you note any or identify any shortcomings with this particular test?
Well, much like the static test, again, it leaves the door open to all those questions, right? About, again, doing this at 2 miles an hour doesn't tell you anything about, well, what happens at 10? What happens at 15? What happens at 20, right? In terms of what are the collision forces? What's the damage? How does the arm move? What would the expected injuries be, right? This dynamic test, as well as the static test, doesn't answer any of those questions for us.
Is this test from Dr. Welcher considered a force calculation?
I'm not aware of him making any type of force calculations or measuring accelerations or anything of that nature, no.
Did Dr. Welcher conduct any testing to determine whether the damage to Miss Reed's Lexus was consistent with the striking of an arm of a pedestrian?
I'm not aware of any impact testing that he did, no.
Did Dr. Welcher conduct any testing to determine the forces necessary to cause the damage to the taillight of Miss Reed's vehicle?
Not that I'm aware of, no.
Did Dr. Welcher conduct any testing to determine the forces necessary to cause the injuries to John O'Keefe's arm?
No, not that I'm aware of.
Did Dr. Welcher provide any opinions as it relates to the speed of the subject Lexus at the time of the alleged incident?
No, from reviewing his report and his PowerPoint and analysis, I could not find anywhere in it a specified speed or even a range of speeds.
Did Dr. Welcher provide any opinion as it relates to the forces experienced by the taillight in such an impact?
Not that I'm aware of, no.
Did Dr. Welcher provide any opinion at all as it relates to the post-impact trajectory or movement, if you will, of John O'Keefe's mass or his body subsequent to the alleged conduct?
No, not that I'm aware of.
Next slide, please. Do you recognize this photograph?
Yes.
What is this?
So this is something that you probably have heard and certainly I've discussed already, but this is looking at the right rear corner of the subject Lexus, specifically in the area of the damaged right taillight.
Did you consider this photograph in coming to your opinions and conclusions?
Yes.
What, if anything, of significance did you note about this taillight, other than the fact that it's damaged?
Well, I'm going to jump to the next slide, if you will. So this is now the taillight obviously has been removed from the vehicle. So obviously what's important here is looking at what is the damage that we have to this taillight. What components were damaged in this alleged interaction. So we're looking at the clear diffuser at the bottom is fractured and missing. Same with the ones on the vertical side. The majority of the outer red lens is also missing and fractured. And then on the back side, we also have some damage in terms of some fracturing to that black plastic, and there's also a chunk of plastic missing on the top portion of the taillight as well.
I want to ask you a couple of questions about that diffuser. If you could focus your attention on this area. Describe for the jurors what they're looking at in terms of the diffuser. What is the diffuser?
Right, let me see if this... So the diffusers, right where my mouse is, there's a clear diffuser that runs along the bottom, and then there's another diffuser that runs along here, and then it also goes up vertically. Same here on the bottom one, that also goes up vertically. So this piece was missing and fractured on the bottom, along with the vertical portion. The chrome piece here you can see is also fractured and damaged, and then the kind of the second tier, if you will, that clear diffuser was also fractured and broken on the upper section as well.
Was that of significance to you in your review of the damage to the taillight?
Yes.
Why?
Well, because that tells me that we have to have enough force and energy to break, we talked about earlier that 5mm thick red outer lens. We have to have enough force to be able to get beyond that to now start penetrating into the interior components of the taillight to get to, again, those clear diffusers and certainly cause damage to get induced out the back end of the taillight as well.
May I have just a moment?
Yes.
Dr. Wolf, did you bring with you an undamaged taillight exemplar?
Yes. It's up here with me.
It's up there. Oh, I was just looking for it.
Yep.
Thanks for nothing. Describe what it is that you brought with you.
So I brought a two-part assembly. So what I did is I 3D printed a bracket so that I could mount the liftgate taillight assembly as well as the quarter panel taillight assembly.
And these are undamaged in sort of manufacturing specs, correct?
Correct, yes.
May I have just a moment, Your Honor?
Okay.
You have it with you up there at the witness stand?
Yes.
Could you retrieve that with the court's permission?
Okay.
If you could remain standing for just a quick second. Do you recognize what that is?
Yes.
Is that what you just described?
Correct, yes.
Describe it one more time for the court and the jury. What is it that we're looking at right here?
So this is an exemplar set of taillights from a 2021 Lexus LX 570. On my left side here, this is the liftgate taillight assembly, and it's attached to the quarter panel taillight assembly. And I will note it's not normally like that. Obviously, you can't have a connector, else you wouldn't be able to open the liftgate, but I've printed a bracket back here so that these can remain as one unit.
Your Honor, with the court's permission, I'd like to have that marked as next in order.
Is that coming into evidence?
Yes, if possible.
Is that okay?
Okay.
Okay. So how?
May I approach?
Yes.
This might be clunky. Thank you. If you just have the tag, perhaps put somewhere on the maybe the liftgate side.
And is Dr. Wolf going to use it for his testimony now?
He is.
Okay.
Very
So
briefly.
give it back over there, please, Chrissy. Just give it to him. Thank you.
Is it 250?
Thank you. If I may, Doctor.
Yes.
May I?
Okay?
Thank you. Dr. Wolf, you indicated that there was a 5 mm area of acrylic covering the diffusers, correct?
Correct.
What I'm knocking on, is that the 5 mm acrylic?
Yes, both on the quarter panel part that you just pointed to, as well as the liftgate part.
Mr.
Those are-
Jackson, why don't we give that back to the witness and let him do it instead of you?
Sure. Is there, can you see through that loose material into the diffuser that you've just been describing?
Yes, so as I mentioned earlier, in this area here, there's a diffuser that's running along the bottom.
So, Dr. Wolf, I'm going to ask you to not have that so close to court reporters.
My apologies.
Use the other side of the witness stand.
Yes, Your Honor. So along the bottom is the clear diffuser that runs along and then goes up vertically. And then on the second tier, there's also a clear diffuser that runs along here and then goes up vertically. And you might be able to see it through, it kind of looks like there's little dots on it. So that's what I'm referring to in terms of the diffuser that's underneath. And that, again, so you have that outer material that's 5 mm roughly in thickness. And then those diffusers are about 3 mm in thickness underneath this.
Could you make a determination, and you can go ahead and have a seat. Well, actually, you may not want to. Could you make a determination of the space, the gap between the outer plasticine area, the outer acrylic area, and the internal diffusers? If you could just estimate that gap.
If I had to estimate, I'd probably estimate around an inch, maybe inch and a half.
Okay. You indicated that something was of significance to you in this photograph about the diffusers on the subject taillight, correct?
Correct.
Describe, now that you're holding that, what was it that was of note to you, Dr. Wolf?
So as I mentioned, we have damage not only to this outer thick portion, but it was enough force and energy to then penetrate deep enough to fracture the underlying diffusers that sit below this outer surface, and certainly enough force then to work its way back through inducement into the backside, and ultimately there was a top portion of the taillight that was also fractured up here.
Was all that significant to you in your review of the subject taillight material?
Yes.
Okay, you can go ahead and put that away.
All right, so that can't go back there because it's in evidence. So why don't you take it and...
I was just going to store it there until he's finished with his testimony, and then we can give it to the clerk magistrate.
Okay.
However you want to do it, Your Honor. I have no preference.
Is he using it still for his testimony?
Not right now.
All right, so, thanks, Jim.
Thank you. Thank you, Your Honor.
Okay?
May I continue?
Yes.
Can we go to the next slide? What are we looking at here?
This is a collection of photographs that depict various fragments from the right rear tail lamp assembly of the Lexus. And I will note that, and I'll try to spotlight it, there are a few fragments in this photograph that are glass fragments, which, as I discussed earlier, there's no glass in the taillight, so these did not originate from the assembly. But altogether, from what I recall, there's about 50 fragments, I believe, that were counted or so, maybe a little less than that from the right taillight.
If we could go to the next slide, please. What are we looking at here?
So these are photographs depicting the sweatshirt or hoodie that Mr. John O'Keefe was wearing on the night of the alleged incident.
And what was the role that this played in your analysis, ultimately?
Well, so one of the things that I noted, and I can go to the next slide, is there were a series of small punctures or holes in the sleeve, on the right sleeve of the sweatshirt in varying sizes. I think some as small as just a few millimeters. Again, I think there was maybe 10 or 12, I think I recall, on the right sleeve of that sweatshirt.
If we could go back to the larger photo, the previous slide, do you see the right sleeve denoted on the photograph to the right?
Yes.
Does it? Your review of these photographs, what was the significance of the triangular sort of arrows or markers?
I believe those were to annotate or draw attention to those holes.
Okay, the defects in the right sleeve?
Correct.
Can you count those for us, please?
On the photograph on the right, I believe I see a total of 9.
And what about the photograph on the left, just the right sleeve area?
The holes in John's
9 as well.
jersey are sweater poking holes in this prosecution's case.
If we can go to the next slide. What are the arrows pointing to in these photographs?
So this is basically the previous shot, but what appears to be close-ups of some of those evidence markers.
You indicated some of the sizes. What were some of the smaller sizes of those defects or holes?
From what I recall, like I said, I think it was around 3 to 5 millimeters, maybe some of the smaller ones.
How big is 3 millimeters in inches?
It'd be probably around like an eighth of an inch or so.
Can we go to the next slide, please? What are you describing when you say the word fundamental, or do you write the word fundamentals?
So I want to discuss some very basic concepts that I hope will kind of resonate as we go through the PowerPoint so that you have an understanding of the underlying physics and what I'm talking about.
Can you go ahead and describe the role of an accident reconstructionist and the fundamentals that an accident reconstructionist undertakes when performing the kind of testing that you performed?
So, as I mentioned earlier, when I was describing what a simple definition of accident reconstruction is, it's the application of physics and engineering to collision events. So I want to go through some very basic elements of that so that you have an understanding of the physics.
Can we go to the next slide, please? What are we looking at here?
So this might be something you all remember back from high school physics, but even though it's been around since the late 1600s, we still use these laws today. So what we're looking at here is what I've done is just describe Newton's laws very simply. So, and again, you might be familiar with these. So, for instance, if we're talking about Newton's first law, an object at rest tends to stay at rest and at a constant speed unless it's acted on by an outside force, right? So if my arm is just here, right, it's just going to stay there until I give it a push or a pull, right? When I do that, that's going to induce an acceleration, right? So that's when we get into Newton's law, where if I apply a force to a mass, I'm going to cause it to change its speed. It's going to accelerate. And then Newton's third law, basically the law of reaction, indicates that when I push on my arm, there's also an equal and opposite force going back to my hand that I'm pushing with.
What role did these three very fundamental laws of physics play in your reconstruction or your ultimate opinions and conclusions following your accident reconstruction in this case?
So when we're talking about the concept of acceleration, what you will see in the dynamic test that we did and conducted, we measured the acceleration of an arm when it's impacted by a taillight. If we know the mass of the arm and we've measured the acceleration, we can use Newton's second law, which is force is equal to mass times the acceleration, to calculate what that force is applied on the arm, which ultimately you will hear from my colleague, Dr. Rentschler, to talk about that.
Is that broadly considered a force analysis?
Yes.
What role did force analysis, your force analysis, play in the accident reconstruction that you did or you undertook in this case?
Well, there's certainly going to be a correlation between the impact speed and the damage that we see. The higher the impact speed, the greater the force. So from my perspective, I was interested in the speed and the force to look at what's the observed damage to the test taillights that we did.
Do you think that's fundamental to an accident reconstruction?
Yes.
Did Dr. Welcher engage in any force analysis with regard to John O'Keefe's arm and the taillight?
No.
Not that I'm aware of, no.
Let's move to the next slide, please. What are we looking at here?
So don't be too afraid. This is some really simple equations that I want to show you. So that first one, delta V. So what do I mean by that? That simply just means you could think of delta, change in. So change in velocity. So if you look at that equation, the change in velocity, really simple. If I've got an object that's, let's say it's initially, for what V0 is, initially at 0 miles per hour, I hit it, and it's now moving 10 miles per hour. That means it underwent a change in speed of 10 miles an hour and is moving at that velocity.
Poor choice of words.
Acceleration is essentially how quickly did that velocity change occur, right? Did it go from 10 miles an hour in a split second, or did it go to 10 miles an hour over a few seconds? So depending on the timing of that, how quickly that change in velocity occurred will determine what the acceleration is. And as I've already mentioned on the previous slide with Newton's second law, we can then take that information about acceleration and apply it to, if we have a known mass, to calculate what the force on that object is.
How did these math equations, delta V, acceleration, force, how did these play into, what role did they play in terms of the accident reconstruction here, in this case?
Well, they're extremely fundamental. And I think as we go through the PowerPoint, you will have an appreciation and understanding of what these concepts are. You'll see that I have plotted graphs with acceleration that shows the rate in that change in speed over time. You will see graphs of delta V, so the change in speed of the arm as it's being impacted by the taillight. And then ultimately we can calculate the force of that impact to be able to assess whether or not there's a mechanism for the injuries. And as I mentioned, that'll be my colleague, Dr. Rentschler, that will discuss that.
Can I ask you about delta V specifically? I'd like to focus on that for a second. Is that okay?
They're a reputable company, aren't they?
When you say that that equation suggests or dictates that an object that is struck by another object...
Nope. Nope. Bad breweries. Time out.
...with mass moves up to the same speed of the object that struck it. Describe that in a little bit more detail in colloquial terms, if you will. 6th grade terms.
I'm sorry, can you rephrase the question?
Probably not. Because I don't understand it as well as you do. If an object, does delta V describe the circumstance in which you have an object that may be at rest and it's struck by another object moving? Is that calculating the speed at which the object that has struck moves to the same speed as the object that struck it? Objection.
So that's sustained. Just ask him a simple question, let him answer.
Easier said than done, Your Honor. Sure. Can you describe in more conversational terms what delta V is describing in terms of mathematics?
Right. So let's just give an example specific to this case. If the majority of the arm is struck by a 6,000-pound vehicle moving, let's say at 20 miles an hour, that arm will experience a change in speed. It'll go from 0 up to about 20 miles per hour due to that impact. So that would be the change in speed. If my arm is at rest, stationary, is impacted by a 6,000-pound vehicle, it's going to change its speed up to roughly what that impact speed is.
And what about acceleration? What are you describing, or what is math or physics describing in that equation in terms of the time it takes for that arm to now move from 0 to 20?
Right, so that's how quickly that change in speed is occurring. So to give you maybe an example you're more familiar with, let's say you're driving down the road, you come up, you see a red light at the intersection, right? You're going to get on the brakes lightly, and your vehicle is going to change in speed, right? It's going to slowly decelerate. Let's say you're driving and a deer jumps out in front of you, you got to slam on the brakes, right? You're going to change your speed much quicker. So that's an example of two different rates of acceleration. One where you're mildly braking, right? You're going to coast down slowly, versus a sudden, emergency in front of you like a deer. You're going to slam on the brakes and your speed change is going to be it's going to happen much quicker with that acceleration rate.
Are there circumstances in which the acceleration can be from 0 to, say, 20 miles an hour in milliseconds?
Yes, when we're talking about impact durations, especially of this nature, yes, they're not going to be, we're not talking about the impact occurring over a second, 2 seconds. That's extremely long. Even a duration of a couple hundred milliseconds in the context of this is considered long.
And then, of course, the force calculation is associated with the delta V and the acceleration calculations. Is that right?
Correct, yes.
In what way? What are we looking at in terms of that a little bit more complex calculation?
Absolutely. So if you look at the bottom equation there, where I have force is equal to mass, and then that top component is the change in speed, right? That delta V, V1 minus V naught, divided by the change in time, T1 minus T naught. So if you substitute in that equation, right, that's delta V over delta T, which is acceleration. So there's a relationship between all of these equations.
And do all of these equations, or did all of these equations assist you in coming to determinations and opinions and conclusions concerning this case?
Yes.
Are these normally accepted methodologies in determining delta V, acceleration, force, all the force dynamics or impact dynamics in an accident reconstruction?
Absolutely. They are the core of physics.
Can we go to the next slide, please? What are we looking at here? Scientific method. What does that mean?
So the scientific method is a process that scientists typically use to be able to reach conclusions. And so you could think about it in this case. We make an observation, right? We have injuries to the arm. We've got a damaged taillight. So let's try to do some research to figure out, okay, has anyone done testing with that, right? Has anyone hit an arm with the taillight, see what happens, see what the forces are, right? And then we start to make a hypothesis, right? So what happens, it's kind of an if-then statement. If the arm contacts the taillight, does the taillight break? Does it not break, right? What's the hypothesis there? And at least my understanding of reviewing Dr. Welcher's work, it appeared to be that his hypothesis...
Sustained. Next question.
Sure. Did you review, well, let me ask a different question. Going back to the calculations previously, the delta V, the acceleration, the force calculations that you described to the jury, did you see anywhere in any of Dr. Welcher's reports or his data that he undertook those core calculations?
No.
Am I supposed to be
With regard to the scientific method, did you see whether or not Dr. Welcher followed this scientific method as you're explaining it to the jury?
Sustained.
What did you note, or what opinions or conclusions did you come to about the scientific method, if any, that Dr. Welcher did or did not undertake?
Sustained.
Did you review Dr. Welcher's entire database? In other words, all the reports, all the raw data, and his PowerPoint?
Yes.
Did he undertake the scientific method as you know it?
Right, so that's sustained.
Continue to describe the scientific method as you know it and you employ it.
Certainly. So, again, from reviewing Dr. Welcher's report, he indicated...
Sustained. I want to see you at sidebar.
No worries, Deanna. I'm not long for this. Well, I was going to say I'm not long for this world, but I'm not long to stay up much longer or anything either. I think. I did get through some of the wing pieces, which is good, because there's like 8 of these pieces that go off like that and form a backpack. But the stickers were really finicky. So. For those of you that didn't catch it, that objection was on the basis that he was opining on what Welcher didn't do, as opposed to providing his own information. Yeah, Bears, I think we're all supposed to be asleep. It's almost 1 a.m., so... Well, when I say that, those of us in the Southern Hemisphere should be asleep. So... Ward, stop posting on YouTube. You lost me. No idea. The real problem that I have here is that because it's 1 a.m. Saturday morning for me, I'm completely and utterly brain fried, and I don't really have anything interesting to say during these sidebars. I guess I'm a little bit out of practice, but Should we switch back over to the microdots video while we wait for them, depending on how long they take it? Don't scroll up to find out Aussie. It's not a good idea. Well, you know that I'm going to scroll up now. So AJ's trying to ask about the inertia force or the fictitious force, but I understand why he may not want to say the last part, but that's what it is. It's the science. I would say so. Oh, thank God for that.
Dr. Wolf, may I inquire, Your Honor?
Yes.
Dr. Wolf, where are we on the chart? I've lost my place.
I think hypothesis.
Okay. Let's describe, if you would, please, what role hypothesis plays in the general scientific method.
So generally, it's like I said, it's an if-then statement. So if you make a statement, if the arm contacts the taillight, then the taillight will shatter, right? So you want to do tests and experimentation and analyze that data to see whether you can accept or reject that hypothesis.
And what's the next stage?
So as I mentioned, after hypothesis, it's once you've determined that, what your hypothesis is, you want to test with experimentation, analyze that data, and that certainly may be an iterative process that you do multiple times to then be able to draw a conclusion from that analysis and testing.
Oh yeah, Larry and Chandler.
What's the next stage?
To basically report those conclusions and findings.
Why is it important to report those conclusions and findings?
Well, I think so that you can, whether you can accept or reject the hypothesis that was put forward earlier.
Do you have to analyze the data following the testing that you undertake?
Yes, like I mentioned, I think it's an iterative process, because certainly you could do one test and it may not be clear what the answer is at that point, so you may have to do additional tests to basically parametrically evaluate your hypothesis.
Did you see this well, let me ask you first, did you undertake this scientific method with regard to your reconstruction or your testing in this case?
Yes.
Did you observe this same scenario in Dr. Welcher's report?
Sustained as to that form, Mr. Jackson.
Did you see this undertaken anywhere else?
Sustained there.
May we approach?
Did you look for testing in Dr. Welcher's evaluation, all of his data?
Yes.
Did you find any?
No.
Other than the static blue paint test?
That was the only test, correct.
Did you see any force dynamics testing?
That's leading, so you can
Sure.
get to it without that.
What about any other testing? Anything else that we've talked about? Do you see anything else done in Dr. Welcher's report?
As it pertains to an analysis to the taillight and the damage and the forces, no.
Let's move on to the next slide. Did you actually undertake testing in furtherance of the scientific method?
Yes.
Let's move on to the next slide and you can describe what we're talking about. What are we looking at here?
So you're looking at a test matrix of the various tests that we conducted at ARCA. I could go through them one by one if you want.
Let me ask you foundationally, was your testing directed toward determining whether or not the scenario proposed in Dr. Welcher's report was consistent or inconsistent with what you would find ultimately?
The objection sustained.
Was your testing specifically designed to determine whether the damage to Miss Reed's vehicle, her Lexus, was consistent with the scenario that was proposed by Dr. Welcher?
Yes.
That's sustained too. Ask it differently, Mr. Jackson.
What was your testing? What were you engaged in terms of your testing? What were you trying to find out?
Well, I think it was to, again, we talked about earlier about that hypothesis, right? My understanding, Dr. Welcher indicated that the arm contacted the taillight, but there was no analysis or testing to determine what's the expected outcome of that. What's the damage to the taillight?
So you answered the first question. I'm striking that second part. Ask another question.
Was there anything else?
I think simply put, it's to find out what happens when you impact an arm with a Lexus taillight at various speeds. What happens?
What was your understanding of Dr. Welcher's hypothesis?
That's sustained.
Did you have an understanding of Dr. Welcher's hypothesis?
That's sustained too.
Ultimately,
he's sitting there trying not to laugh.
What were you trying to find out through your testing?
As I mentioned, I think it was to determine when you impact a taillight at 10 miles an hour, 15 miles an hour, 25 miles an hour, what happens to the taillight? What's the expected damage? What happens to a sweatshirt when it makes contact with that? What happens to the fragments? How does the arm move? What's the acceleration of the arm? What's the change in speed of the arm? And certainly, as I mentioned, my colleague, Dr. Rentschler, will discuss what are the expected injuries in that type of impact.
Did you see any of those questions answered in Dr. Welcher's report?
Yes.
Ask it differently.
What did you see in terms of Dr. Welcher's report as it relates to those types of questions?
That's sustained.
Ultimately, did you undertake a methodology to perform the testing to answer the questions that you just explained needed to be answered for this jury?
Yes.
Describe that, please.
So we started out, we kind of worked at this incrementally, right? We didn't start right off the bat with utilizing an exemplar Lexus going right into an ATD or a test dummy, right? We wanted to start in the laboratory to have an understanding what happens at a range of speeds, in this instance, in our first two tests, between 10 and 17 miles per hour, right? What happens, what kind of damage do we observe, right? At 10 miles an hour, do we even break the light? At 17, what kind of damage do we get? What kind of accelerations do we get? And then we moved up to full-scale vehicle impact testing.
Is that methodology that you just described generally accepted in the field of accident reconstruction, in the broader field of engineering?
Absolutely. Everything from utilizing an instrumented test dummy to using an exemplar vehicle, to all the data acquisition systems that we had in the laboratory, as well as the vehicle, all of that.
Mainly because, and I can't stress this enough, the lack of knowing what the objections that are being raised actually are mean that she can tailor her answers. So, for example, if Brennan was to say objection here, saying it was the incorrect objection, she'd have to overrule it. If all they say is objection, she can come up with what she believes the appropriate objection would be anyway. And I hate that. I really, really hate that. Because it's not like there's going to be any record of it anywhere. It doesn't go into the transcript, it doesn't go into whatever else, it's just she sustains the objection based on her own opinions, and I hate it.
That is generally accepted techniques in the field of accident reconstruction to evaluate what we did in this case.
And are those techniques also supported by peer-reviewed articles in scientific literature related to accident reconstruction?
Yes.
Did you rely on this methodology that you just described to render opinions and conclusions as it relates to this case?
Yes.
Have you relied on that same methodology in rendering opinions and conclusions in other courts?
Yes.
Let's go to the next slide, please. What are we looking at here?
So we've gone over this before, but this is looking at the exemplar vehicle that we utilize for the latter part of our testing. You're looking at again, just annotating where the liftgate taillight is, as well as the quarter panel taillight.
When you say exemplar vehicle, what is this SUV that we're looking at?
So it's the same year, make, and model of the subject vehicle. So it's a 2021 Lexus LX 570. So it's the same weight, same geometry, same as the subject vehicle.
Is this a picture off the internet, or do you actually have access to this truck?
We have access to that vehicle, yes.
And ultimately, what testing did you undertake specifically as it relates to this particular vehicle?
We did full-scale vehicle testing with the vehicle driving into an ATD arm, as well as an ATD arm attached to a dummy, and then a full-on impact to a test dummy.
Did you assess the damage to the right tail light after these various tests?
Yes, after all of the tests.
Did you assess the acceleration and quantify the forces that were involved?
Yes.
Did you assess the material and textile damage to the clothed ATD?
Yes.
Ultimately, did you conduct lab tests in an effort to answer some of these questions as well?
Yes.
And you've already mentioned this, but you utilized in your testing the exemplar vehicle to the fullest extent that you felt necessary?
Absolutely,
Were
yes.
you hampered or hindered in any way in terms of damaging the vehicle or utilizing the vehicle in any way that you wished?
No.
Let's go to the next slide, please.
Only when Mr. Brennan showed up and decided that he wanted to oversee things and tell us what we could and couldn't do.
What are tests A and B? What are those laboratory tests?
So these were the initial two tests that we did to get an idea of starting to test this hypothesis. As I mentioned, we weren't sure at 10 miles an hour what would happen to the taillight. We wanted to see what would happen at 17 miles an hour with the arm. So again, it was to evaluate from a starting point what happens in this interaction based upon how Dr. Welcher had his arm oriented in his PowerPoint and analysis.
Next slide, please. What is this?
So you're looking at a photograph of our lab setup. You can see on the left side of that is our Hybrid 3 anthropomorphic test device. To the right is a linear impactor, and this is something we already have in-house that we built years ago for our testing that we do for the National Hockey League when we're looking at, what's the accelerations on an impact to a goalie wearing a helmet, right? We use this same device for that type of testing to measure head acceleration. So we applied this same linear impactor to be able to project, if you will, or accelerate the taillight at a known speed into the ATD arm.
What are some of the instrumentation that you use in addition to the mechanical impactor? What's some of the instrumentation you use to track the data?
Certainly. So you could see, I'll get my, see where I'm here. So at the top here, there's a blue camera here. There's another blue camera here. So these are our high-speed cameras. And you'll see there's a bunch of lights around those high speeds. That's just because the frame rate's so high. And again, it's only sampling a very, very short amount of time. So you have to have a lot of light when you do these high-speed tests. So we have the high-speed cameras running. We have an accelerometer mounted to the ATD arm here on the other side. So that's some of the instrumentation. There's also a couple other cameras that we're documenting this overall.
Can we move to the next slide, please? What are we looking at in these photographs?
So this is looking at, and not to be confused, this wasn't the arm position when the impact occurred. This is just showing you the setup. So on the left is just kind of an overall shot, and then on the right is, right here is a uniaxial accelerometer. So that's going to measure, we talked about that term earlier, right? The acceleration. So that's going to measure how quickly is this arm changing its speed, right? What's the acceleration of the arm as it's impacted?
Does that accelerometer put into motion some of the mathematical formulations that you talked about earlier?
Yes.
Let's move to the next slide, please. Tell me about these photographs.
So the importance of this is, more specifically looking at the right photograph here, might be a little bit hard to see, but we wanted to get the same exact sweatshirt or hoodie for the testing to evaluate if the taillight breaks, is there a mechanism for the fragments to penetrate and cause holes in the sweatshirt as were observed in Mr. John O'Keefe's sweatshirt?
Next slide. Were you successful in finding the exact replica sweatshirt?
Yes, and I will note, as I mentioned, I know it probably is hard to see, but the material blend on the sleeves are the exact same. They are 60% cotton and 40% polyester.
Was it important in your mind to maintain consistency with the data that you had received concerning John O'Keefe's clothing?
Certainly. I think we wanted to try to control as many variables as we could.
Let's move to the next slide, please. Test A. Describe Test A for us, please.
So you're going to see a series of photographs and then videos, but Test A was mounting a preconditioned taillight on that linear impactor to accelerate it into the Hybrid 3 arm to, again, evaluate the damage to the taillight and the acceleration to the arm.
Let's move to the next slide, please. What are we looking at in these photographs?
So you're looking on the left, a photograph just before the impact test was conducted. On the right, you're looking at a thermal image that is depicting the temperature profile of the taillight.
Describe that thermal image.
Certainly. Your Honor, may I refer to my notes?
Yes.
So what I did is I analyzed the profile of the temperature down in this area. And when we look at that segment, that lower portion here, where contact was made, the average temperature in that area was about 34 degrees with a minimum of about 33 degrees.
How did you get that exemplar taillight down to around freezing?
So all of the taillights that we tested were preconditioned overnight in a freezer.
Why was that important?
Well, it's my understanding that at the time that this allegedly occurred, the ambient temperature was 31 degrees Fahrenheit. So as I mentioned earlier, certainly there's a correlation between how plastics perform in cold weather. So we wanted to take that variable into account in our testing to precondition them down to temperatures that were consistent with at the time of the alleged incident.
Next slide, please. What are we looking at in this slide, on this photograph?
So this is a video. Do you want me to go ahead and play the video?
Tell us what we're about to see, and then I'll ask the court's permission.
So you were looking at a camera that is mounted above the entire setup. If you look at the top portion of this video, you will see the taillight. Part of it's covered by the high-speed camera. But what will happen is the linear impactor will fire, and the taillight will be accelerated up to 10 miles per hour, striking the clothed ATD arm.
With the court's permission,
Okay.
let's go ahead and play the video. Next slide, please. What is this?
So this is also a video, but
Funny
with
how
the...
we've got actual scientific recordings of the experiments that these guys did. I'm curious to see exactly how fast they were able to get it to go.
high-speed camera, so it's the high-speed camera that's looking top-down at the arm. So you will see when the video plays, you will see the taillight enter from the left and contact the arm. And I will note that this is essentially slow mode, so it's not happening in real time. So you'll see the taillight slowly moving, but it's actually in reality moving at 10 miles per hour.
Understood. Go ahead and play that. Can I ask a question now that that's played? How did you mount the taillight to the accelerator, that linear accelerator?
Right, so we had to get a little bit creative there because you may have observed this when we had the physical assembly out earlier. The back of that, it's not some nice clean surface that we can just bolt on. So what we had to do is 3D print a bracket that we could bolt onto the linear impactor, and we used a polyurethane expanding foam to be able to marry those two together so that we could then bolt it onto the linear impactor to use it for this test.
Did you see any debris from that foam mounting mechanism?
Yes, there's a few flakes you can see of that polyurethane foam off the backside kind of going into being dispersed there.
Okay. With regard to this particular 10-mile-an-hour test, what did you note in terms of the damage to the taillight?
It was very minimal.
And what did you note in terms of any damage at all to the hoodie?
There was none.
Can we go to the next slide, please?
Tell me they
What are
did
we
it
looking at in this
24
slide?
miles an hour.
So this is looking at a side view, so same test, just looking at it from the side. And similarly, you'll see the tail light come from the left and impact the arm.
If we could play this, please. What did you note in terms of deflection of the arm, the test arm?
Well, the arm essentially, and we'll see this in the data later, it reaches a common velocity with the tail light based upon the portion of the arm that was contacted, again, consistent with how Dr. Welcher has it oriented, it will become accelerated up to 10 miles an hour roughly.
Over approximately what period of time is that arm accelerated up to 10 miles an hour along with the tail light?
We'll see it on the data plots. I think it's about 10 milliseconds or so.
How long, do you know how long an eye blink on average takes?
Off the top of my head, no, I don't. Probably pretty quick.
Somewhere around 250 milliseconds? Does that sound right?
Sustained.
Let's move to the next slide, please. What are we looking at in this series of photographs?
So these are extracted frames from the high-speed video that we just saw on the previous slide, basically showing just at contact, just after contact, and then post-contact, so you can see the kinematics of the arm and how the arm is moving.
Okay. Let's move to the next slide, please. What is this photograph?
So this is photographs taken of the taillight after the 10-mile-an-hour test. I will note that there was a couple small fragments of the clear portion of the assembly, the outer lens that was missing from that turn signal area towards the left here. There was a couple fragments missing, and then there was some small fracturing here in that area.
How would you describe the damage to the taillight at the 10-mile-an-hour test?
If I may go to the next slide, I think it might.
Sure.
So this was the totality of that damage at 10 miles per hour. So I would describe it as minimal and superficial.
Okay. Next slide, please. What is this?
So this is the photograph that I just shown you compared to that of the subject taillight so that you can have a side-by-side comparison of the test taillight compared to that of the subject.
Were you able to reach any opinions and conclusions about whether the damage to the subject taillight is consistent with striking an arm at 10 miles an hour?
It's inconsistent, in my opinion.
Next slide, please. This is still test A, is that correct?
Correct.
Were you able to reach any opinions or conclusions as to whether or not the damage to Mr. O'Keefe's clothing is consistent with being struck by the taillight at 10 miles per hour?
What I observed from the test is that there was no mechanism to create any of the holes that we observed on the subject sweatshirt.
Do you hold that opinion to a reasonable degree of scientific certainty?
Yes.
As well as the former opinion that you just gave us?
Yes.
Next slide, please. What are we looking at in this graph?
So this is a graph that shows the roughly, on the next graph, you're going to see a 24 millisecond window. So what I want to show you on this graph is what does that look like over a full second so you can have an appreciation of just how quickly this is occurring. As you mentioned earlier, I think your comment about a blink of an eye, this is even shorter than that. We're looking at, as you'll see on the next graph, again, it spans over just a few milliseconds. So that yellow tick that you see in the middle there, what I've done is I've plotted that over a full second. So 1 second is equal to 1,000 milliseconds. So if we go 500 milliseconds to the right, 500 milliseconds to the left, this whole graph represents 1 second in time. This impact duration is occurring very quickly.
1 second, is that reflected from the beginning of the graph to the end of the graph? That's representative of 1 second, is that right?
Correct. So starting at this y-axis all the way to here is 1 second in time with our impact duration happening over just a few milliseconds.
And this was at 10 miles an hour?
Yes.
Next slide, please.
Bit of choking on
What are we looking at in this graph?
So we're looking at the acceleration or the change in speed over time, that parameter that we discussed earlier. So what you can see is that as the as the arm is impacted, we had the accelerometer mounted on the inside portion of the forearm, if you will. You see that it starts to accelerate, right? Because it's changing its speed, and then it starts to level off after the impact has subsided, basically, and it's reached a common velocity.
What do we see in terms of the G-forces that are the arm is subject to?
So the peak is occurring right around here at about, looks like just over 6 milliseconds. And the peak acceleration is just over 130 Gs.
And what does that mean? What is a G?
So a G is acceleration due to gravity. So if we're being held down by 1 G, so you could think of it as basically a multiplication factor, that it's 131 times the acceleration due to gravity.
And the next slide, please. What are we looking at in this slide?
So this is, again, that concept that we talked about earlier, delta V. This is the change in speed. So if we do some math to the previous data that we collected, it's a technique called integration, but we can actually add up all of that acceleration to determine what speed did the arm get up to. And when we do that calculation to this data, what we see is that initially at the impact, right, the arm's at rest, right, Newton's law, first law. And then we impart a force on it in terms of the tail light impacting it. It's going to cause the arm to accelerate and change its speed. So as I noted earlier, it's essentially going to reach a common velocity with the impact force based upon how Dr. Welcher has the arm oriented. And we can see that it's a tick over 10 miles per hour at just over 10 milliseconds. So that means that the arm in a 10 millisecond period is going from 0 up to about 10 miles per hour, which was the speed of the impact.
And 131 times the force of gravity is exerted on the arm at the same time?
Sustained is to that form.
Where does gravity play into this? What is the 131 Gs? Where's that force exerted?
So that is the acceleration that the arm experienced as a result of that impact. So that's how quickly it was changing in speed.
Understood. Let's go to the next slide.
So is this a good place to take the morning recess? All right, folks, we'll take a recess. Dr. Wilkins can file the jurors. I'm going to see counsel regarding just scheduling, please.
All rise for the court, please.
All right, well, that's what, a 20-minute break, so I don't have enough filler for that. And frankly, it is 10 past 1 in the morning and I need to get some sleep. So, at some point, I'll probably be back tomorrow. I mean, what was I going to say? I may finish this tomorrow or some point over the weekend. Monday's a public holiday for me, which is when I would normally cover this anyway. So at some point in the next 48 hours, I'll finish this off because this ARCA stuff is really interesting. But Connor's got his drinking stream tomorrow, and I plan on dropping by for that. But yeah, keep an eye out, folks. Hang on, I'll just wait and see if anything actually happens after the jury leaves. I know I haven't been providing too much in terms of commentary. I'm just tired, people. There's a reason I'm not usually doing this live at the moment. So thank you to the 35 of you that have been watching. I do genuinely appreciate you keeping me company this Friday evening. All right. Oh, hang on. There he is. There's Larry. Needed a vodka tune-up before lunch. He's going to bed. He says, swigging the last of his Coke. There's Aiden. Oh, come on. It doesn't take this long for the jury to leave. Oh, they're at a side door. Okay, never mind. All right, peeps, I'm going to head off and get some sleep. As always, please remember, you are not a piece of shit. You have value and do contribute to society, especially for being here and keeping me company through this shit show. I will try to be a little bit more entertaining, but just for posterity, just for tax purposes, I now have a jetpack on it as well. And I'm in the process of putting together the wings and stuff, which look pretty cool. Although I'm up to this bit, which is actually really cool because it sort of like moves on its own. So it's cool. Anyway, stay healthy, wealthy, wise people, and I'll catch you all very shortly. Cheers, peeps. Where's the button?
And again, on your way out, please do me the favor of hit the like and subscribe button if you're so inclined. It costs nothing. It's absolutely free, and we'll be friends forever. Bye now.
This shit, I'm out. Fuck this shit, I'm out. No thanks. Don't mind me. I'ma just grab my stuff and leave. Excuse me, please. Fuck this shit, I'm out. Nope. Fuck this shit, I'm out. Alright then. I don't know what the fuck just happened, but I don't really care. I'ma get the fuck up out of here. Fuck this shit, I'm out.